streets of New York City in search of his estranged father, Walter Hobbs. With a childlike spirit and unwavering determination, Buddy's journey is filled with chaotic encounters, laughter, and moments that warm the soul as he transforms a dreary department store into a festive wonderland. Along the way, he reminds everyone around him of the joy and magic of Christmas, proving that love and acceptance are the greatest gifts of all. Will Buddy succeed in reuniting with his family and rekindling the holiday spirit in those he meets? The tale begins. A book rested on the polished surface of a wooden table, its cover a vibrant invitation to the world of Christmas wonder. The title, Elf, shimmered in gold lettering, while a cheerful drawing of Buddy the Elf, a towering figure with a wide grin and an even wider heart, took center stage. Clad in his green tunic and yellow tights, Buddy seemed to leap off the page with the kind of infectious energy that promised an unforgettable tale. Without warning, the book quivered. The pages fluttered to life as if guided by unseen hands, settling on the first page. A vivid illustration emerged, a cozy workshop tucked away in the heart of the North Pole, the home of none other than Papa Elf himself. The colors glowed with warmth, as if the magic of the scene couldn't be contained within the lines of the drawing. Far away in the real North Pole, this very workshop existed in all its enchanting glory. Inside the workshop, the air inside Papa Elf's workshop was fragrant with the mingling scents of sawdust, peppermint, and the faint tang of freshly fallen snow. Tools of every shape and size hung in neat rows on the walls, their gleaming surfaces catching the soft glow of the lanterns above. Scattered across the long wooden workbenches were an assortment of toys in various states of completion. A wooden train missing its wheels, a jack-in-the-box whose springs still needed a final tweak, and a dollhouse painted with delicate care. In the midst of it all stood Papa Elf. Despite his 540 years, an impressive milestone even by elf standards, he radiated the vigor of someone half his age. His round glasses perched on a small nose, and his face, framed by a snow-white beard, bore the perpetual expression of good cheer. He turned toward an invisible audience, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "So, you're here for the story?" he said, his voice as warm as a cup of cocoa on a winter's night. "Okay, just let me wet my whistle." With a flourish, he reached for a snowflake-etched shot glass sand, poured himself a splash of milk from a small pitcher. Raising it like a toast, he downed it in one swift gulp, then smacked his lips theatrically. "Woo!" he exclaimed, grinning. "That's strong. Must be 2%. Chuckling, he set the glass down and leaned against his workbench. His expression softened, and he began to speak, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a storyteller in his element. "Elves love to tell stories," he began. "You probably didn't know that, did you? Well, there's a lot of things about us that people don't know. For instance, we can't tell a lie. It's physiologically impossible. And here's another interesting elfism. There are 3 jobs available to an elf." He held up a finger. "1, you can make shoes at night while an old cobbler sleeps, but it's not exactly the most rewarding work. The cobbler's workshop." The scene shifted to a dimly lit cobbler shop where 2 elves toiled over a mountain of shoes. Their small hammers clanged against nails, their expressions sour. In the background, a portly cobbler snored in his chair, an open magazine titled Hot Cobbler resting on his chest. The cover featured a buxom woman clutching a high-heeled shoe. One of the elves, wiping sweat from his brow, muttered, "Lazy bastard couldn't even make a flip-flop." The elf tree. The image shifted again, this time to the exterior of a massive oak tree nestled in the snow. From within, the sounds of frantic baking could be heard, pots clanging, ovens hissing, and the muffled chatter of industrious elves. "Or," Papa Elf's voice continued, "you can bake cookies in a tree, but it's dangerous having an oven in an oak during dry season." The calm was shattered by a loud yelp, followed by the shrill wail of a siren. Suddenly, flames erupted from the tree, sending smoke spiraling into the crisp winter air. Soot-covered elves stumbled out, coughing and waving frantically for help. Back in the workshop, Papa Elf chuckled, shaking his head. "But the 3rd job..." He paused, letting the words hang in the air as if savoring their importance. Well, the third job makes being an elf worthwhile. Some call it the show or the big dance. It's the profession every elf aspires to, building toys in Santa's workshop. His voice grew more animated as he spoke, his hands gesturing to emphasize his words. It's a job only an elf can do. Our nimble fingers, natural cheer, and active minds are perfect for toy building. They've tried using gnomes and trolls, but the gnomes and trolls. A brief glimpse of chaos unfolded. A gnome sat slumped at a workbench, a stein of beer in his hand. He hiccuped once before vomiting spectacularly under the table. Meanwhile, a troll wearing a sagging diaper was being chastised by an exasperated elf who scrubbed the floor with a mop. Let's just say it didn't work out, Papa Elf concluded. The reveal. He straightened, his tone growing quieter, more serious, and no human could ever do this work. Their hands are too big and they tend to get testy when overworked. In fact, no human has ever set foot in Santa's workshop. He leaned in closer, his eyes sparkling with a secret. That is until about 30 years ago, and in case you haven't guessed it, that's our story. He took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into the memory. It was back in 1968, a particularly successful Christmas. The scene dissolved into a cascade of shimmering snowflakes, each one catching the light like a tiny star as the story began to unfold. Chapter 2, A Baby in the Sack. The flickering glow of the orphanage's Christmas tree danced against the shadowy walls. The soft hum of a carol played on a battered radio as a nurse worked briskly in the dim light, changing the diaper of a 10-month-old baby who wriggled and giggled on the changing table. "You're quite the giggler, aren't you?" the nurse said, smiling as she expertly secured the fresh diaper. She picked him up and cradled him for a moment, her heart warmed by the sound of his laughter. "Well, it's time for night-night," the baby babbled, kicking his chubby legs as she gently lowered him into his crib. She tucked a blanket around him and kissed the top of his head. "Merry Christmas, my angel," she whispered as she left, her silhouette disappearing into the hallway. The room was quiet now, save for the soft creak of the rocking crib. The baby, wide-eyed and curious, pulled himself up to the crib's gate, his tiny hands gripping the wooden bars. His gaze was drawn to the chimney as a strange sound echoed through the room, a muffled thud. Santa arrives. A black boots of Santa Claus descended with a soft clang onto the hearth, followed by the rest of his rotund figure. Dusting soot from his red coat, Santa moved quickly to the Christmas tree, his white-gloved hands deftly placing presents beneath its twinkling branches. Unnoticed, the baby leaned further over the crib's gate, his bright eyes fixed on the large figure by the tree. The gate creaked, and with a delighted squeal, the baby tumbled out onto the floor. Santa, distracted by a metallic clang from behind, turned sharply. His eyes widened. The crib was empty, a baby's adventure. From the baby's perspective, the world seemed vast and filled with wonder. He crawled determinedly toward the source of his fascination, a large fuzzy teddy bear poking out of Santa's sack. His tiny hands reached out, grabbing onto the bear's plush paw. Santa turned just in time to see the baby vanish into the depths of his big red bag. "Oh, hold on!" Santa exclaimed, hurrying toward the sack, but before he could retrieve the curious stowaway, a magical gust of wind swirled around him. The bag shimmered and snapped shut, leaving no trace of its tiny passenger. Chapter 3, The Workshop Discovery. Back at the North Pole, the elves celebrated another successful Christmas. Santa's workshop buzzed with energy as the elves, dressed in festive outfits with wide 1960s collars and sharp sideburns, danced, sang, and congratulated one another on another year well done. "Speech! Speech!" the elves chanted. Seated in his rocking chair, Santa rose to the sound of thunderous applause. He smiled warmly and gestured for quiet. All right, Santa began. "Well, we've had another successful year." Prancer managed to keep his bladder under control over Baltimore. The elves burst into laughter as a party horn blew in the background. "And we didn't forget Delaware this time." Santa finished with a twinkle in his eye. The workshop erupted in cheers. Santa looked at his watch, dramatically counting down. And now, after all that hard work, it's time for a vacation. Starting now. A beat of silence passed. The elves rested their heads on their desks, pretending to nap. "Okay, vacation's over," Santa boomed. "Back to work, time to prepare for next Christmas." As the elves cheered and scurried back to their stations, a peculiar sound interrupted the festive atmosphere. "Goo, gah!" Santa froze mid-step, his ears perking at the faint cooing noise. The workshop fell silent as the sound grew louder. Santa turned toward his sack, his bushy brows knitting together in confusion. What in the name of Sam Hill? Before anyone could answer, a small hand emerged from the sack, followed by the unmistakable giggle of a baby. Santa stepped back, wide-eyed, as the baby crawled out dressed only in a diaper and looked up at him with an angelic smile. The elves gathered around, their mouths agape. One of the elves, a quick-witted twin, stepped forward and inspected the baby's diaper. "It says, 'Little Buddy Diapers' on the back?" "Its name is Buddy," his twin exclaimed. "He must have snuck into your sack at the orphanage," another elf reasoned. "What do we do, Santa?" Santa looked at the baby, who stared back at him with innocent curiosity. The old man's expression softened and he let out a deep chuckle. Papa Elf's reflection. Papa Elf's voice echoed over the scene, warm and nostalgic. Santa had a decision to make, but when it comes to babies, Santa's a pushover, so Buddy would stay. Santa chose me, an old elf who had always wanted a child but had been so committed to building toys that I'd never settled down. My, how I loved that boy. Growing up, Buddy. A montage followed, showcasing Buddy's extraordinary childhood. The crib, a giant baby squished awkwardly into an elf-sized crib. Super 8 film, a 2-year-old Buddy nearly as tall as Papa Elf, wobbling on shaky legs but laughing all the same. Birthday party Buddy, at 7, pedaling a tiny tricycle with a laughing elf on his back and another tucked under his arm. Basketball, at 12, Buddy dunked effortlessly over 3 elves who laughed and cheered. Papa Elf's voice returned. Tough as it was, Buddy wasn't so different from the other elves. Not really. And though the Code of Elves forbids lying, we all agreed not to tell Buddy the truth about his origins. Not until he asked. Buddy's world was full of laughter and learning, but there were moments when his human size caused challenges. A rapid series of painful incidents showed Buddy colliding with door frames, beams, and cabinets, exclaiming, "Ow! Golly! Son of a nutcracker!" Yet through it all, his boundless enthusiasm remained unshaken. But something was coming, something that would change Buddy's understanding of himself and his place in this magical world. Chapter, A World Too Small. The tiny workshop buzzed with its usual cheerful energy, the air thick with the scent of peppermint and sawdust. The warm golden glow of the fireplace danced on the wooden walls, reflecting off the baubles and tinsel strung with meticulous care. Yet, the scene felt anything but cozy as Buddy, teetering precariously on a step stool, reached for the top of the semi-tall elf Christmas tree. "Careful, Buddy," warned Pom Pom, biting his lip nervously. Buddy's felt slipper snagged on a shimmering ornament. His arms flailed like windmills, eyes wide with panic as the tree wobbled ominously. "Whoa, whoa!" Buddy yelped, struggling to regain balance. Crash. The tree toppled, dragging Buddy down with it. His long limbs tangled in garlands, he tumbled backward into the fireplace. A collective gasp filled the room as flames licked at his costume. "Fire! Fire!" shouted an elf, pointing. Pom Pom sprang into action, his tiny hands wielding a miniature fire extinguisher. A cloud of foam enveloped Buddy, snuffing out the flames and leaving him sitting amid a pile of smoldering decorations dripping in extinguisher spray. The elves stared, mouths agape. From above came a calm, narrating voice tinged with affection. Papa Elf Fifth-o, and nowhere were Buddy's differences more obvious than in Santa's toy shop. Chapter, Falling Short. The rhythmic pounding of tiny wooden hammers echoed through Santa's workshop. The assembly line was a symphony of precision, with elves crafting etch-a-sketches in perfect synchrony. That is, until the camera panned to Buddy. He hunched over his station, brow furrowed, the toy parts in his hands woefully mismatched. Just as he finished hammering one side, the other fell apart. Ming Ming, the elf supervisor, approached with a clipboard, his smile tight with polite concern. "Gee, I'm sorry, Ming Ming," Buddy began, his voice quivering. "I'm gonna come in a little short on my quota today." Ming Ming squatted to meet Buddy's gaze. "How many etch-a-sketches did you get finished?" Buddy hesitated, clutching a misshapen box of his handiwork. His lip trembled as he whispered, 85. The room fell silent. The other elves exchanged glances, their tiny ears twitching. 85 might as well have been 0 in this world of lightning efficiency. "Well, don't worry about it, Buddy," Ming Ming said, voice forcibly upbeat. "It's a great start. You're only 915 off pace." Buddy's eyes brimmed with tears. "Why don't you just say it, Ming Ming? I'm the worst toy maker in the whole world. I'm a cotton-headed ninny muggins." "No, you're not," Ming Ming countered quickly. "We all have different talents, that's all. Actually, it seems like everyone has the same talents. Except for me," Buddy said, folding his arms and slumping into his too-small chair. The elves around him chimed in, their voices chirpy with exaggerated positivity. "You changed the batteries in the fire alarm." "Triple A's, perfectly aligned. You're the only baritone in the choir. Without you, we'd sound like chipmunks." Despite their efforts, Buddy's face remained downcast. "I'm sick of being extraordinary," he exclaimed, pushing himself up from his desk. The cramped space made his exit clumsy as his knees banged against the table and his head smacked the doorframe on the way out. Chapter: The Truth Unfolds. Buddy burst into Papa Elf's workshop, his face flushed with frustration. Without a word, he locked himself in the absurdly small bathroom. Inside, the walls pressed in on him, the porcelain fixtures laughably miniature. He perched on the doll-sized toilet, his knees practically to his chest, and sobbed. Knock, knock. "Son, are you okay?" Papa Elf's voice was gentle. "Go away." Buddy's reply was muffled. "Buddy, please. Open up. Let's talk about this." After a long pause, the door creaked open. Buddy squeezed out, still sniffling. Papa Elf guided him to the couch, sitting him down with an audible grunt as Buddy's weight settled on his lap. "All right," Papa said, adjusting his glasses. "What's bothering you?" Buddy's words spilled out in a torrent. "Everyone knows you're Santa's Master Tinker, and Grandpapa was Master Tinker before you. I'm supposed to follow in your footsteps, but I always let everyone down." Papa Elf's expression softened. He took a deep breath. "Buddy, there's something I need to tell you, and it's long overdue." Buddy's large, innocent eyes locked onto his father's. "What is it, Papa?" Papa Elf hesitated, his mouth opening and closing as if grappling with words too heavy to say. Then abruptly, he changed course. "I need your help with something," he said, standing up. "Come with me." He led Buddy through a hidden door, revealing Santa's sleigh. The lacquered wood gleamed under golden lights, its polished surface radiating an almost magical aura. Buddy's eyes widened. "Wow, can I touch it?" Papa chuckled. "Touch it? You're going to help me make it fly." Buddy's wonder turned to confusion. "I thought the reindeer made the sleigh fly." Papa Elf nodded solemnly. "They do, but their magic comes from Christmas spirit. And well, Christmas spirit is running loud." Buddy gasped. "How? Doesn't everyone believe in Santa?" Papa Elf's face darkened. "Not everyone. There's a rumor that parents put the presents under the tree themselves." Buddy's jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous. Parents couldn't do all that in one night." Papa Elf gestured to a gauge on the sleigh's dashboard. The claws-o-meter needle hovered dangerously in the red zone. "That's why we had to install this," Papa said, pressing a button. The sleigh roared to life, the turbojet engine letting out a high-pitched whine. Buddy's jaw hung open. "Oh my gosh." "Watch the language, son," Papa Elf chided. Buddy nodded. "Sorry, Papa, but I don't understand. Why tell me all this now?" Papa Elf placed a hand on Buddy's shoulder. Because you're special, Buddy. More than you know. And it's time you learned why. The testing room buzzed with activity, a cacophony of ticking gears and whirring machines. Elves moved with precision, their workstations lined with a variety of toys in various stages of assembly. The faint sound of a cheerful holiday tune echoed through the room, making the otherwise industrial space feel strangely festive. At the center of it all stood Buddy, cranking away at a conveyor belt that passed toy after toy to be tested. With each turn of the crank, a jack-in-the-box popped out in time with the familiar Pop Goes the Weasel tune. Buddy flinched, his eyes wide in surprise every single time. He slapped his hand to his chest as the puppet leapt out, his face contorting in mock terror. "Ah!" Buddy yelped, taking a step back. The next toy followed suit, the crank turning, the melody ringing out, "Pop!" "Ah!" Buddy groaned, steadying himself. But then the third jack-in-the-box failed to pop right away, leaving an awkward silence hanging in the air. Just as Buddy relaxed his shoulders, the box sprang to life with a force that made him jump straight into the air. "Ah!" Buddy's heart raced, and he turned to his supervisor, Crumpet, who stood nearby watching him. "I'm going to take 5, okay, Crumpet?" Buddy asked, breathless. Crumpet, a gruff elf with a perpetually furrowed brow, barely looked up from his clipboard. "Okay," he muttered, not really noticing the distress in Buddy's voice. Buddy's footsteps echoed as he made his way toward the elf kitchenette, his mind still spinning from the barrage of unexpected jump scares. But just before entering, his ears caught a snippet of conversation from behind him. 2 elves standing off to the side didn't notice him overhearing their words. "And that extraordinary bit, that was quick thinking," Foom Foom, a spindly elf, said in a low voice. "Hey, I feel bad for the guy," Elf Supervisor replied, shaking his head. "I just hope he doesn't get wise." Foom Foom chuckled. "Hey, he's believed he was a real elf for this long, hasn't he?" Buddy froze in his tracks, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. He stood motionless as if the world around him had gone still and his surroundings blurred into a haze. His mind raced with the words that had just pierced his sense of reality. He's believed he was a real elf. The words echoed over and over. A rush of images surged in his mind, quick flashes of memories from his entire life, ones that hadn't quite made sense but now felt like jarring clues to an unsolved puzzle. The shoemaker's shop. He was squeezing his feet into a pair of freshly made elf shoes, grimacing with each step. In bed, he tossed and turned, the bed so small that they practically swallowed him whole. The elf shower, struggling to wash under a shower head that was 3 feet too short. The elf choir photo, his waistline alone visible in the group shot. He'd been cropped out entirely. The memories spiraled one after another, until all he could hear was the pounding of his own pulse. Ow, jgs.yikes.golly.charles.ickens. Some of a nutcracker. Buddy gripped his head, stumbling backward. The dizziness was overwhelming as his knees buckled under him, the world spinning wildly. Pom Pom, a small elf with a round face and worried eyes, spotted Buddy's collapse and rushed over. Concern etched across his features. "You don't look so good, Buddy," Pom Pom said, his voice soft with worry. "Are you okay?" Buddy opened his mouth, attempting to respond, but instead, his body betrayed him, collapsing forward into Pom Pom's arms with an audible thud. Pom Pom groaned as Buddy's weight pinned him to the floor. "I'm okay, Buddy," he muttered from under Buddy's bulk. "Don't worry about a thing. I'm warm." Buddy woke to the soft glow of the workshop's warmth, his senses still foggy. He blinked slowly, taking in the familiar surroundings of Papa's workshop. The sight of his adoptive father, Papa Elf, standing over him, looking both concerned and tender, brought a wave of comfort. "Ooh!" Buddy groaned, sitting up. "I had a terrible nightmare." Papa Elf, his face filled with gentle affection, sat beside him. "What is it, Buddy?" Buddy swallowed, his voice thick with emotion. "I dreamt I wasn't an elf at all. I was a human. Oh, it was awful. I'm not a human, am I, Papa?" Elf sighed deeply, his expression softening. "I knew this day would come. he began, his voice heavy with a quiet truth. You see, buddy, I love you, and nothing can ever change that. But the fact is, it wasn't a dream. You're not like the rest of us. Buddy's breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered in his chest, disbelief making his words feel hollow. You mean I'm not an elf? No, son, Papa Elf whispered, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the revelation. You're a human being. The world seemed to stop. Buddy's face paled. No wonder I'm always freezing, he blurted, his hands instinctively clutching at his sides. Papa Elf's voice softened. We decided it was best to let you think you were one of us. But I thought elves can't lie, Buddy protested, his voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and frustration. We can't, Papa Elf replied gently. But Buddy, you never asked. I thought for sure when you cracked 6 feet it would come up. Buddy's eyes widened in realization, his voice breaking. I thought I had a glandular problem. Your glands are fine, Papa Elf said quietly. Buddy felt his emotions welling up, his hands trembling. So, you're not my papa? He asked, his voice small, vulnerable. Papa Elf pulled him into a tight embrace. Oh, I'll always be your papa, he said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. It's just, you have another papa, too, a biological papa. Papa Elf reached into a drawer and pulled out a small photograph, an old yellowed image of a young couple in love. The woman had soft eyes and a kind smile. The man beside her was older, more rugged, but there was a tenderness in his gaze. Papa Elf's voice was a whisper as he recounted the story. Your father, Buddy, he fell in love with a beautiful girl named Susan Wells when he was very young. You were born, and she had to put you up for adoption. And she passed away not long after. Your father never even knew you existed. Buddy stared at the photograph, his mind swirling. His fingers brushed over the image of his father. New York City. The words on a snow globe in Papa Elf's hands caught Buddy's eye, and the realization hit him hard. His father was out there, somewhere. Your dad's in New York, Papa Elf murmured, a magical place far away from here. Buddy's heart raced. New York? He repeated, his voice hoarse. I need to go to him, Papa. I need to find him. Papa Elf hesitated for a moment before handing Buddy the snow globe, the lights inside flickering with the reflection of the Empire State Building. You'll always have a home here, Buddy, but I understand. You need to find your father. Buddy took a deep breath. His emotions were a whirlwind, but beneath the confusion and uncertainty, something else stirred. Hope. I'm going to find him, Buddy said, his voice firm and filled with a newfound resolve. I'm going to New York. Papa Elf's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Buddy, and I'll always be here for you. Buddy smiled through his tears, wiping his eyes. I love you, Papa. I miss you. I really will. As he ran out of the workshop, leaving a trail of snowflakes behind him, Buddy could hear the soft, whispered farewells of the elves and the comforting calls of the animals in the distance. Buddy's boots crunched in the snow as he sprinted away from Santa's workshop. The vast expanse of the North Pole stretched before him, a world of frosty wonders and colorful creatures. A rabbit hopped across his path, its little nose twitching in the crisp air. Hey, Buddy! Want to sing and pick snowberries? The raccoon called out cheerfully from behind a snowdrift. Not now, Pipsy! Buddy shouted, not breaking his stride. His breath came in sharp, visible bursts as he continued running, his heart pounding with excitement and confusion in equal measure. A familiar figure appeared in his periphery. A snowman standing in front of a quaint cottage, puffing out a small cloud of frosty air. It was Jim, the snowman, a towering figure made entirely of snow with a carrot nose and twig arms that looked as though they might snap under the weight of their own awkwardness. Ooh, Buddy! Jim's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried over the wind. Buddy skidded to a halt, momentarily out of breath. Hi, Jim. What's wrong? Ow. Jim winced, his snow head tipping slightly to the side. Sorry, my back's out of line again. Do you mind cracking it for me? Buddy smiled despite himself, shaking his head. Sure, Jim. He moved behind the snowman and gently placed his hands on the frozen back. With a firm press, a loud crack echoed across the frozen expanse. Jim let out a deep sigh. his frosty features relaxing into a satisfied grin. "Oh, thank you, buddy. That's so good. It's from all the standing. They never build me sitting down. Hey, why the long face?" Buddy dropped his hands, a sigh escaping his lips. "Well, Jim, it seems I'm not an elf." "Of course you're not," Jim said, his voice surprisingly calm. "You're 6'3" and had a beard when you were 15. Buddy blinked at him, trying to process that. "Papa says my real father is living in a magical place far away." Jim's voice softened as he looked down, his twig arms drooping. "At least you have a father. I was just rolled up one day. I never had anyone to play catch with, and even if I did, I only have sticks for arms." Buddy's face softened at Jim's words, and a gentle warmth spread through him, making him feel less alone in the vast cold of the North Pole. "I guess I am pretty lucky after all?" Jim perked up, his voice lifting. "I bet your dad would be so happy to see you, he'd hug you and never let go." "I wish I had a dad to hug. And even if I did, I only have sticks for arms." "I understand about your arms, Jim," Buddy said, his tone sincere. Jim chuckled lightly, his face turning back toward Buddy with a grin that only a snowman could muster. "Well, you should do all the things I can't. Go see him, hug him, and play catch, and scratch your ass." Buddy's eyes lit up, a mischievous grin forming on his face. "I will. I'm going to go find my dad." With a final wave to Jim, Buddy turned and sprinted toward the snowy horizon, the magic of the North Pole enveloping him as he took his first steps into a world that would soon be very different from the one he had known. The next morning, a jubilant tune echoed through Santa's workshop as Buddy walked down the familiar corridors, waving to every elf along the way. "Bye, Choo-Choo. Bye, Sunshine. Bye, Tinkle-Winkle. Bye, Puffy. Bye, Flade. Bye, Gale." He called each name a cheer as he passed his friends. Santa appeared at the end of the hallway, his large, jolly frame making its way toward Buddy. "So, I hear you're going on a little journey to the big city?" Buddy nodded, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Yeah, but I'm kind of nervous. Jim told me New York is really different." Santa chuckled, a booming sound that seemed to shake the very walls. "Don't listen to Jim. He's never been anywhere. He doesn't even have any feet. I've been to New York thousands of times." Buddy's eyes widened, his curiosity piqued. "Wow, what's it like?" Santa smiled warmly, patting Buddy on the back. "Well, there are a few things you should know. First off, if you see gum on the street, leave it there. It's not free candy. Second, there are about 30 raised pizzas, and they all say they're the original, but the real one's on 11th. And if you see a sign for a peep show, it doesn't mean they're letting you look at presents before Christmas." Buddy's face scrunched in confusion, his thoughts racing. "So much to remember." Santa laughed heartily. "Don't worry. Something tells me this trip is going to be good for you." He patted Buddy again. "It's time for my buddy here to spread his wings." Buddy's eyes shone, a mixture of excitement and fear. "I can't wait. Me and Dad are going to go ice skating and eat sugar plums." Santa's face softened, and he lowered his voice. "That's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. You see, Buddy, your father. Well, he's on the naughty list." Buddy froze, his heart sinking. "No." Santa gave a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry, but it's true." Buddy's stomach twisted in agony. "It feels like evil." Santa knelt down to his level, his voice gentle. "Listen, Buddy, some people, they get mixed up about what's important in life. But that doesn't mean they can't change. Maybe your dad just needs a little Christmas spirit." Buddy's face lit up, a spark of hope igniting inside him. "I'm good at that." "I know you are," Santa said, his voice full of warmth. Papa Elf, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. His eyes glistened with tears as he hugged Buddy tightly. "I love you, Buddy, and I'll always be here for you." Buddy, unable to stop the tears, nodded, squeezing his papa back. "Yes, Papa, I'll miss you." "Now go on, Jake," Papa Elf said with a sniffle, a final burst of encouragement. As Buddy ventured out into the dark, snow-covered landscape of the North Pole, animals waved at him, their voices full of affection. "Bye, Buddy," they called, their little voices carrying through the cold night. Buddy grinned widely, waving back. Bye, lovable woodland animals, he shouted, his heart full of hope as he set off toward the unknown. Buddy's journey took him farther from the magical North Pole, and with each step, the cold and harsh real world closed in around him. He sat on an ice floe, drifting along the vast sea, the frosty wind stinging his face as the land of magic faded from view. The next day, Buddy trudged through the deep snow, each step sinking 5 feet into the white expanse. He was exhausted, his legs aching, but he pressed on. His beard was coated in ice, and his face was pale from the biting cold. The weight of his journey bore down on him, but he could not stop. In his pocket, he pulled out the photo of his father, Walter Hobbs. His heart swelled as he looked at the familiar face, a silent promise in his eyes. Meanwhile, in New York, Walter Hobbs sat in his office, a thick stack of papers before him. His fingers drummed idly on the desk as he listened to the nun pleading with him. "You're taking the books back?" she asked, her voice quivering with desperation. Walter shrugged, his tone cold. "Hey, you're the one who's behind on the payments. Don't try to make me out to be the bad guy here." The nun sighed. "We're trying, but it's been difficult to raise the funding. The children are sponsoring another bake sale next month. That should help." Walter's lip curled in disdain. "See, there's your problem. You can't expect a bake sale to make solid cash these days. Places like Dunkin' Donuts and Cinnabon are expanding their product base with alternative breakfast and dessert items. Even Starbucks carries baked goods. You guys really need to start thinking out of the box. It's called capitalism, Miss Peters. If you can't stand the heat, move to Canada." The nun bit her lip, holding back her frustration. "The kids really love the books. I made them," Walter replied coldly. "I'm the one who ran the focus groups." Deb, the secretary, poked her head into the office. "Mr. Hobbs, your 2 o'clock is here." Walter shot her a look. "Would you please use the intercom? We talked about this." Deb hesitated, her face blank. "Do you want me to use it now? I already told you." Ignoring her, Walter pressed the intercom button with a swift jab. "Got it." He turned back to the nun, his voice turning almost polite. "Tell you what, I know how much these books mean to your kids over. I'll give you a 3-week extension." The nun nodded with a sarcastic smile. "Bless your heart." Walter didn't even seem to notice. "If I were you, I'd stay away from perishable goods. Think consumer services. That's hot right now." Buddy's journey had only just begun, and New York City loomed ahead, a land of strange sights and unfamiliar challenges. But with each step, his determination grew stronger. He was ready to find his father. Buddy trudged through the thick, cold terrain of Canada, his boots sinking with every step into the deep, choppy snow. The world around him felt harsh and unwelcoming, but Buddy was determined. He passed a rusted propane tank, its steel frame faded by time and weather, and let out a small huff of frustration as he waded through the muddy patches beneath the snow. His breath fogged in front of him, but the cold didn't bother him, not with his spirits so high. He was on a mission, one that could not be stopped by snow or anything else. Suddenly a rustling sound caught his attention. Out from the thicket, a real-life raccoon scampered into his path. It was much smaller than the animated creatures from the North Pole, but Buddy's excitement didn't wane in the slightest. "Hey," Buddy called with a huge grin. "What's your name? I'm Buddy." Raccoon froze, giving Buddy a suspicious look before darting off to one side. Buddy, undeterred, followed, his long legs bounding through the snow. He managed to corner the little creature, gently trapping it against a tree. "Sounds like someone needs a hug," Buddy said, stretching his arms toward the animal. The raccoon hissed wildly, its fur bristling with aggression, and before Buddy could react, it lunged forward and bit him squarely on the face. Buddy reeled back, his hands flying to his cheek. "Nutcrackers!" he shouted, eyes wide with surprise as the sharp pain from the bite set in. But the raccoon was already gone, retreating into the woods, and Buddy, though nursing his now sore cheek, couldn't help but laugh. "Guess that didn't go quite as planned." He gave his face a rueful rub and then stood tall, his expression resolute. This was just one more obstacle in his path, nothing to stop him from finding his dad. The day stretched on as Buddy continued his trek, and soon he found himself at a highway. The sight of the sign reading New York City, Lincoln Tunnel, made Buddy's heart leap. He had arrived. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in, feeling a combination of wonder and nervous excitement. The great city was right ahead. He could see it. He could feel it. Buddy inched his way through the Lincoln Tunnel, pressed up against the wall to avoid the roaring traffic whizzing by. The noise was deafening, and the air was thick with the smell of exhaust. But Buddy was undeterred. He continued walking, dodging cars like a stray cat. A look of awe crept onto his face as he saw the skyline of New York City appear before him. Tall buildings, gleaming windows, and the majestic Empire State Building towering in the distance. "Whoa," Buddy breathed as he clutched his snow globe in one hand, marveling at the real thing in front of him. It was everything he had imagined, and yet it was so much more. The streets were a blur of movement, noise, and chaos. People hurried by, their footsteps echoing on the pavement, while steam rose from vents and traffic lights changed rhythmically above them. Buddy was lost in the wonder of it all. He paused at the edge of the street, watching the world around him with wide eyes. Cars honked, people shouted, and the city thrummed with life. It was all so new to him, so much to see, so much to learn. Buddy didn't realize the time that had passed as he took in the mundane details with childlike amazement. Scaffolding on buildings, a pigeon strutting along the sidewalk, the smell of food drifting out from street vendors. Buddy wandered into Times Square, trying to engage the bustling crowd. He stepped up to a woman hailing a cab and cheerfully waved at her. "Hi," he called, but the woman didn't respond, too busy to notice him. "Happy afternoon." Buddy tried again, but the woman merely rushed past. Undeterred, Buddy turned to the next person he saw, raising his voice with an enthusiastic "Salutations!" No one stopped to pay him any attention. In fact, no one seemed to notice the elf in the middle of Times Square. Buddy blinked, confused but not discouraged. This was New York. Maybe people just didn't have time for greetings. He turned to the animated billboard above him, eyes wide with awe as the bright colors shifted and moved. A man bumped into him, knocking Buddy slightly off balance. "Why don't you watch your ass, Buddy?" the man barked, not even pausing to glance at Buddy as he walked away. Buddy nodded in agreement, completely misunderstanding the sentiment. He looked over his shoulder at his own rear end, then stuck it out with a little wiggle. "He's right," Buddy said, giving himself a good look. "I've got a pretty nice butt." The next moment, Buddy found himself running around a revolving door, overjoyed at the simple mechanical motion. He spun and spun, laughter bubbling out of him until his feet started to slip. Then he spotted a sign in a dingy diner window, "World's Best Cup of Coffee." Buddy's eyes lit up. He entered the diner, where a group of jaded, uninterested staff looked up from their work as he excitedly approached the counter. "Wow," Buddy exclaimed. "The world's best cup of coffee. You did it. Congratulations to all of you." He clapped his hands, looking around at the unimpressed faces. Next, Buddy spotted a piece of gum stuck to the sidewalk. His face lit up, and without thinking, he bent down, picked it up, and popped it into his mouth. He chewed with a smile, savoring the taste, until suddenly his expression faltered. It was sticky and unpleasant. He grimaced but couldn't resist playing with the gum as he chewed, his face shifting between delight and confusion. Two men were handing out flyers, and Buddy was handed one. He looked at it, confused, then, in a burst of inspiration, handed it to another man standing nearby. The second man took it, and before Buddy knew it, Buddy was handed a new flyer in return. His face lit up with joy as he repeated the process, exchanging flyers back and forth with the same enthusiasm he'd had as a child. A dog walker approached, holding a bag of dog waste in one hand and newspaper in the other. Buddy, thinking it was a game, grabbed some spare newspaper and walked up to the man. He held the paper out to him with a bright, beaming smile. "Here you go, sir. Thought you might need this." Buddy paused, staring up at the massive Empire State Building. He pulled out his snow globe and held it up against the real thing, comparing the two in awe. "Dad," he whispered softly, his heart pounding in his chest as he stood there in the shadow of the towering skyscraper. He was so close now, so close to finding his father. Inside the building, Walter Hobbs was deep in a conversation with a printer. The printing press whirred in the background as Walter picked up the latest proofs of Puppy and the Pigeon, scowling at the 2 missing pages. A reprint? Do you know how much that's going to cost? Walter muttered. The printer, ever patient, shrugged. Well, 2 whole pages are missing. The story doesn't make sense without them. Walter rubbed his temples in frustration. You think a kid is going to notice 2 pages? They just look at the pictures anyway. He shot a glance out the window. Let's just get this solved. At Deb's desk, Buddy stood with an innocent smile, his hands clasped behind his back. Buddy the elf, here for Mr. Walter Hobbs, please. Deb, deadpan and unamused, looked up at the elf standing in front of her desk. You look hilarious. Who sent you? Papa Elf from the North Pole, Buddy said, beaming with pride. Papa Elf. That's rich, Deb muttered under her breath, but Buddy's unshakable optimism only made her more confused. Back in Walter's office, he stood discussing the issue with the printer when the intercom crackled to life. Mr. Hobbs, it's me on the intercom. Deb's voice came through. Walter sighed. Go ahead. I think someone sent you a Christmasgram. A Christmasgram? Walter grumbled. I don't have time for a Christmasgram. But before he could say anything more, Buddy stepped into the frame behind him, his eyes wide with excitement. Walter turned slowly, startled by the sudden presence of his son. Dad? Buddy asked tentatively, his voice a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Walter hesitated for a moment, then let out a sigh. All right, let's get this over with. Buddy's heart raced as he stood there, nervous and excited. I walked all day and night to find you. Walter played along, trying to mask the growing tension in the room. Looks like you came from the North Pole. Buddy nodded eagerly. That's exactly where I came from. Santa must have called you. Walter raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I just got off my cell with him. So, go on. Go on with what? Buddy asked, confused. Are you going to sing a song or can I get back to work? Walter's voice was strained but trying to remain patient. Buddy's eyes lit up. A song? Anything for you, Dad? He took a deep breath and in an impromptu fit of joy sang, I'm here with my dad. I've never met him and he wants me to sing a song. I was adopted and you didn't know I was born. But I'm here and I love you, Dad. He launched himself forward and hugged Walter tightly. Walter blinked, stunned by the outpouring of emotion. Wow, that's weird. Usually, you guys just put my name into a Jingle Bells or something. Buddy pulled back, eyes shining. It's me, your son. Susan Wells had me and didn't tell you, but now here I am. It's me, Buddy. Susan Wells? Walter's eyes narrowed in confusion. What kind of Christmasgram is this? Buddy tilted his head, still smiling. What's a Christmasgram? Walter leaned in toward Deb, speaking in a whisper. Deb, we may want to call security. I already did, Deb whispered back. Buddy leaned closer, lowering his voice to a dramatic whisper of his own. I like to whisper, too. The air outside was brisk, the concrete sidewalk slick with patches of snow and ice. Buddy's arms were held firmly by 2 security guards, each of them pulling him along as they frog-walked him across the front steps of the building. His eyes were wide, as though every moment was a new adventure, even as he tried to process the sudden turn of events. My dad runs this whole company, Buddy exclaimed, trying to sound enthusiastic. I bet he's a genius. The second security guard shot him a smirk. Must run in the family. They both chuckled lightly. I wouldn't come back for a while if I were you. Buddy, undeterred, gave a little grin as he shuffled along. Yeah, it seemed like he may need some daddy time, he said, glancing over at the guards with a mischievous glint in his eyes. You guys are strong. Yeah, get lost, came the response from the first guard, his voice gruff. Buddy nodded vigorously. I already am lost. They tossed his jingled hat at him as they walked back inside, the sound of their footsteps echoing as the door swung closed behind them. He quickly bent down to retrieve his hat, dusting it off before looking across the street, his gaze locked onto something that immediately filled him with wonder. Across the way stood Gimbel's department store, a towering monument of holiday magic. Lights twinkled from every corner, the air alive with festive music, and a giant Christmas tree glowed in the center of the bustling display. Buddy's heart soared, and his face lit up in a wide, beaming smile. "Wow!" he breathed, his voice filled with awe. It was as if he had stumbled upon the very heart of Christmas itself. With an excited skip, Buddy darted toward the street, eyes fixed on the magical store ahead. But before he could take another step, a sudden bam. A cab swerved into him, sending him sprawling across the pavement in a flurry of limbs. Traffic screeched to a halt, and for a split second it seemed as though the whole world had paused. Buddy, however, sprang back to his feet in an instant, grinning like nothing had happened. "I'm okay. Thank you," he called to the driver, waving cheerfully as if he'd just been bumped by a friendly stranger. With a final glance at the vehicle, he began skipping again toward Gimbel's, this time with more enthusiasm, if a little more cautious. Inside the store, the atmosphere was nothing short of magical. It was a Christmas wonderland, and Buddy's wide-eyed wonder seemed to match the joy of the decorations. As he strolled through the aisles in his bright green elf suit, he was approached by a perfume clerk holding out a small bottle. "Passion fruit spray?" she asked, her tone indifferent, though curious. Buddy blinked in surprise. "Fruit spray? For real?" he asked, his mouth already opening in eager anticipation. The clerk glanced around, unsure what to make of the bizarre man before her. Finally, with a little shrug, she sprayed the perfume in the air. Buddy inhaled deeply, then instantly staggered back, eyes squinting in discomfort. "Yutch!" he sputtered, spinning around in a frenzy, trying to wipe the taste of the fragrance off his tongue. "What is that?" a montage began, showing Buddy's adventures through the store. Buddy stood hesitantly at the edge of an escalator, his feet planted firmly, uncertain about this moving staircase. Behind him, a man's exasperated voice rang out. "Are you going or what?" the angry man grumbled. Buddy shuffled forward, his leg trembling with uncertainty. As soon as he stepped onto the escalator, it jerked him into a full split, causing him to yelp in pain. "Jiminy Christmas!" Buddy muttered, awkwardly trying to regain his balance, but only managing to attract more confused stares from the onlookers. Later, in the public restroom, Buddy had a new fascination, the size of the toilets. He exited the stall with wide eyes and began accosting a stranger. "Have you seen this toilet? It's ginormous!" he exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. To another man nearby, he shouted, "Look at this toilet!" The man merely sighed and rolled his eyes, clearly not interested in Buddy's fascination. At the candy aisle, Buddy grabbed handfuls of candy canes and devoured them with remarkable intensity, his face lighting up with each sugary bite. In the elevator, he faced the wrong direction, staring directly at an angry man. The man glared at him, his fists clenched. "You think you're pretty smart, huh?" the man growled. Buddy tilted his head innocently, giving a lopsided grin. "I'm not that smart, but thanks," he said cheerfully. Buddy's misadventures continued as he wandered the store, each new discovery more bizarre than the last. As he wandered into the lingerie section, his eyes landed on a display of lacy nighties, each piece more glamorous than the last. A sign overhead read, "For that special someone." "For that special someone," he muttered, intrigued. Just then, a no-nonsense elf manager approached, her expression stern. "What in the hell are you doing farting around on the first floor?" she snapped. Buddy looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Looking at shiny things," he replied, as though that explained everything. The elf manager's face darkened, her patience wearing thin. "Shiny things? Get your butt back up to the 9th floor before I put my foot up your green ass." Buddy blinked. "Okay," he said simply, before skipping off completely unfazed. Up on the 9th floor, Buddy arrived at Santa Land, which, to be honest, was a little lackluster. The fake snow was nothing like what he'd imagined, and he couldn't help but inspect it, his brow furrowed in confusion. "This snow looks fake," he said, poking at it with his finger. The elf manager shot him an irritated look. "It's white, ain't it?" Buddy crossed his arms. giving the snow a long look. Snow doesn't just pile up unless it's moved with a tool. Like a shovel, he explained, his tone serious. I'd give this some natural erosion, a slight wind drift look. The elf manager shook her head in disbelief. What the hell are you talking about? Erosion? Don't touch the damn snow. What are you smiling at? You think I'm a joke? Buddy's face was still split with a grin. Oh no, I'm just smiling. Smiling's my favorite. The elf manager scowled. Well, take it down a notch. Buddy made an attempt to frown, but his lips quivered, and within moments his grin was back in full force. The elf manager rolled her eyes and sighed. All right, Smiley, sweep the tinfoil off this path. Santa's coming tomorrow. Buddy's eyes widened in excitement. Santa? His voice echoed with disbelief. Oh, may that God! A beat passed before he grew skeptical. Wait, Santa Claus? The elf manager nodded. Yeah, where have you been? Buddy's eyes were still wide as he whispered, The North Pole. The elf manager gave him a quizzical look but didn't respond, merely muttering, Ha! Ha! Start elfing before walking off. Buddy stood frozen for a moment, eyes darting around. Then his attention was caught by a figure standing by the Christmas tree, a petite beauty in an elf suit, hanging ornaments on the tree. Her name was Jovi, and as she noticed Buddy watching her, she smiled with amusement. Are you enjoying the view? She asked, her tone playful. Buddy's grin widened. Yes, I am. I was standing over there and I thought you looked pretty, so I came over to tell you that you look pretty. Jovi raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Why are you messing with me? Did Crumpet put you up to this? Buddy shook his head, his expression earnest. I'm not messing with you. It's just nice to meet a human who shares my affinity for the elf culture, she scoffed. I wouldn't call it an affinity. I'm just trying to get through the holidays. Buddy's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Get through? Christmas is the greatest day in the whole wide world, Jovi chuckled. Well, someone's been drinking the Kool-Aid. Buddy, still not understanding, leaned closer. Uh-oh. It sounds like someone needs to sing a Christmas carol. Jovi looked at him, perplexed. Are you serious? Buddy's smile was mischievous. The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. Jovi just stared at him, her expression confused. Well, thanks, but I don't sing. Buddy's grin widened. Oh, it's easy. It's just like talking, only louder and longer, and you move it up and down. I can sing, Jovi replied slowly. I just don't sing, especially in front of other people. I could never do that. Buddy was undeterred. Never? If you can sing by yourself, you can sing any time. There's no difference. Jovi's voice dropped to a soft laugh. Actually, there's a big difference. Buddy grinned, eyes twinkling with mischief. No, there isn't. Watch! He suddenly burst into song. I'm in a store and I'm singing. People are here and I'm in a store. Jovi looked around, her discomfort growing as people turned to stare at the odd elf who was joyfully belting out a song for no reason. The store I saw shiny and I'm in a store. But he stopped suddenly as if he had just completed a performance. See? He said, grinning at Jovi. Jovi blinked, taken aback. Sow, she said quietly, unsure what to think of this strange elf who seemed to live entirely in the moment. At that moment, a voice echoed through the loudspeakers. Attention, Gimbals will be closing in 10 minutes. Please make your final purchases. The elves around Buddy seemed relieved, their workday nearing its end. Jovi gave a small laugh. Dismissed. Buddy blinked, clearly perplexed. You're leaving? But Santa's coming. Jovi chuckled, shaking her head. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. What's your name? Buddy, he answered brightly. Jovi, see ya. With that, Jovi walked off, leaving Buddy standing alone amidst the festive chaos of Santaland. The half-baked display felt emptier now, the magic of the moment slipping away, but Buddy didn't mind. There was always tomorrow. As the day waned into night, the lights of Gimbals flickered off, one by one, casting shadows over the empty aisles. The final employees shuffled out the door, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous store. A solitary security guard walked down the aisle, his flashlight sweeping over the shelves. Behind him, a rustling sound broke the stillness. Buddy, determined and mischievous, performed a commando role, his lanky body tumbling across the floor with impressive agility. He landed smoothly beside a shelf and peered at the colorful toys. His eyes widened with excitement as he yanked down several items, a can of paint, a robot, and a fire truck. One after another, his hands flying over them like a child in a candy store. He paused when he noticed a logo on one of the boxes. "They have elves in Taiwan?" Buddy muttered to himself, his voice tinged with curiosity. At the Hobbs residence, the dinner table was set meticulously. The soft golden light of the chandelier illuminated the table where Emily sat, her face a mask of grace and concern. She glanced at her son, Michael, who poked at his food with a detached look. Walter, dressed in his business suit, filled his plate with little enthusiasm. "I'm going to eat in my den, okay?" "I've got a bunch of stuff to go over," Walter announced, his voice distracted. Emily's gaze faltered as she looked at him. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm way behind on a bunch of stuff," Walter replied, his tone already retreating into the distance as he stood and moved toward the stairs. He bent down to kiss her on the forehead, but Emily didn't offer the affection in return. With a sigh, Walter kissed the top of her hair and then left without another word. Michael didn't look up from his plate. "Can I eat in my room?" he asked. "No," Emily said firmly. "Why not? Dad's eating in his den," Michael retorted, a smart-ass edge creeping into his voice. "I have a bunch of homework to go over. I'm way behind on a bunch of stuff." "You're eating here," Emily insisted. "Fine, but I'm not going to talk." "Yes, you are. You're going to tell me how your day was," she said, her tone soft but firm. Michael didn't respond, his gaze fixed on his plate. His silence seemed to fuel her frustration. "How was your day?" Emily repeated, her voice rising, filled with barely contained anger. "It was fine, okay? Good," Michael snapped, finally looking up, his eyes blazing with irritation. In Walter's den, the old yearbook lay open on the desk in front of him. He studied a photograph of a young woman, Susan Wells, her smile frozen in time, as beautiful as he remembered. Emily appeared in the doorway, her voice cutting through the quiet. "What are you looking at?" Walter quickly slammed the book shut, his expression guarded. "Nothing. It's for work." Emily didn't buy it. "You know, it'd be nice if we ate together as a family once in a while," she said, crossing her arms. Walter barely looked up. "I'm sorry. I've got to work. How do you think I feel? You think I like to work?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "Actually, I do," she said, her voice tight. "I'm really worried about Michael. He's getting detached and cynical. They're not supposed to do that until they're teenagers." Walter finally glanced up at her, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Well, he is 13 years old," Emily scoffed. "He's 10. She exhaled in frustration. "I don't know what's going on with you, but I've just about had it." Walter looked bewildered. "Had it with what?" Emily's anger flared. "With you, Walter." Walter softened, realizing he'd struck the wrong chord. "Emily." "Wait, I'm sorry. I've been under a lot of stress at work." "If you say the word work one more time, you're sleeping at the Marriott," Emily snapped. Walter gave a sheepish grin, trying to lighten the mood. "The chicken thing was delicious." Emily didn't smile. "It wasn't a chicken thing. It was salmon, zucchini, string beans, carrots, cherry tomatoes, asparagus, mushrooms, and olives." "Well, it was good," Walter said, his charm making a brief appearance, but Emily wasn't swayed. The next morning, Buddy's transformation of Santaland was nothing short of extraordinary. Gimbel's once dreary corner now sparkled with a dazzling array of Christmas decorations. Expensive toys, glittering signs, and festive trinkets. A massive banner overhead read, "Welcome Santa, love Buddy." His face lit up as he surveyed the scene with satisfaction. As he admired his work, a soft, melodic sound drifted through the air. The faintest hint of angelic singing. Buddy's ears perked up, and with a look of pure joy, he began to follow the sound, moving through the aisles with a childlike wonder. The singing grew louder, more beautiful with each step. It was the sound of something pure, something magical. Buddy pushed open the bathroom door, drawn like a magnet to the voice. Inside, Jovi stood in the shower, her back turned, singing half of the classic holiday duet, Baby It's Cold Outside. Buddy, caught in the spell of her voice, silently began to sing along, harmonizing quietly as he approached the curtain. Without thinking, he let loose with a loud, enthusiastic chorus. Jovi froze, her face going pale. She spun around, eyes wide in shock, her towel barely clinging to her. "Ah!" Jovi shrieked. "Ah!" Buddy responded, equally startled. Without missing a beat, Jovi kicked Buddy hard in the groin. Buddy stumbled back, holding himself in confusion and pain, while Jovi scrambled to cover herself, mortified. The morning in Manhattan was busy as commuters hurried along the streets, weaving in and out of the growing crowd. The glass windows of Gimbel's framed an idyllic, magical scene, a Christmas wonderland frozen in time. Buddy lay curled up in a display of faux snow, his mouth open, drooling and sweaty from the sun, completely unaware of how ridiculous he looked. A passerby squinted through the glass, staring in disbelief at Buddy, marveling at how lifelike he appeared. As Buddy itched his crotch, the man's gaze snapped back to reality. He watched wide-eyed as Buddy suddenly stretched and yawned, completely oblivious to his audience. "Good morning, everyone," Buddy announced, his voice boisterous and full of cheer. "Holy fudge," he added, realizing he wasn't alone. From across the street, Walter walked briskly, briefcase in hand, deep in thought. "Dad!" Buddy yelled, his voice muffled behind the thick glass. He pounded the window, desperate for attention, but Walter didn't seem to hear him. His voice echoed back to him like the fading cries of Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate. "Dad!" Buddy's voice rang out, but it barely reached Walter's ears. Walter paused, feeling a strange tug at his attention, but he continued walking. Buddy banged harder, frantic now. His voice reverberated, but Walter still didn't stop. Then, in a flash of realization, Walter glanced over. His eyes widened as they landed on Buddy's face, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. Without thinking, Walter broke into a run. In the Gimbel's lobby, Buddy, full of energy, skipped past the security guards, a box clutched in his hands. The guards scrambled, caught off guard before lunging to grab him. "Hey!" one of them shouted. Buddy called back, grinning. "Hey! Hi, Glenn! Hi, Chris! I just want to give my dad this present. I think he's mad at me, but he won't be after this." "You better leave that with us," one of the guards warned, his hand outstretched. "Yeah, he's real busy," the second guard added. Buddy hesitated for a moment, then nodded, his face falling slightly. "Oh, okay. Well, please tell him it's from me, and that I love him so much, and that he's the greatest dad in the world, and that I love him, okay?" The guards exchanged a look before reluctantly nodding. "Okay." Later, Buddy stood proudly in his transformed Santaland, beaming as visitors marveled at his creation. The display was a hit, children oohing and eyeing, their eyes wide with wonder at the extravagant decorations. But not everyone was impressed. The elf manager grumbled to a coworker, "Who the hell took a dump in housewares?" Buddy's joy was short-lived as Jovi appeared beside him, a determined look in her eyes. "Hey," she said sharply, "I want to talk to you." Buddy stiffened. His anxiety shot up, but he smiled sheepishly. "Oh, okay, what do you want to talk about?" Jovi didn't waste time. "What the hell do you think?" Buddy, flustered, blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I know a pig who can run 11 miles an hour." "Why were you in the woman's locker room?" Jovi demanded, hands on her hips. "I heard you singing," Buddy explained, his eyes wide with sincerity. "Singing?" "Right. I'm sure it had nothing to do with me being naked." Jovi glared at him, though her tone softened. "I should call the police." Buddy's face fell, but he quickly recovered. "What were you doing here so early in the morning?" Jovi shrugged. "They turned my water off." She studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "You were standing there with your eyes closed. What is that? Some kind of thing you do?" Buddy met her gaze, his expression earnest. "You have the most beautiful voice in the whole world." Jovi's skepticism melted away, replaced with a flicker of compassion. "You really were just listening to me, weren't you?" Buddy nodded sheepishly. "I'm sorry." Before Jovi could respond, the elf manager strode over, his patience wearing thin. "This is Santa land, not stand around and wear pointy-ass shoes land. Get busy. Santa's here." Buddy's eyes went wide with excitement. "Santa? Santa is here?" He darted through the crowd, his face flushed with anticipation as he approached a closed gazebo where the Santa awaited. Buddy pushed past the curtain, breathless, his heart pounding. He threw it open with a wide grin, only to be met with the sight of a man dressed as Santa, sitting in his chair. "Santa!" Buddy gasped, rushing forward. "It's me, Buddy!" The children in the room cheered, but Buddy's face fell when he got a better look at the man. He wasn't the Santa Buddy knew. "Who the heck are you?" Buddy demanded. The man in the suit chuckled, hoisting himself up. "Why, I'm Santa Claus." Buddy's expression darkened. "Are not." "Well, of course I am," the man boomed, his voice a poor imitation of Santa's jolly tone. "Ho, ho, ho!" Buddy's anger flared. "If you're Santa, then tell me, what song did I sing for your birthday this year?" You sang 'Happy Birthday'?" the fake Santa stammered. Buddy's face brightened for a split second, then he turned to the children. "He's right," he said, nodding, but his skepticism remained. The imposter Santa brushed past Buddy, settling into his chair with a self-assured, "Ho!" But Buddy wasn't finished. She pointed at the fake beard and shouted, "You're lying! I know it!" His voice was a mix of fury and heartbreak. In a flash, Buddy grabbed at Santa's beard, yanking it off. It came off too easily, leaving the man with a shocked expression. Buddy stared at the fake beard in horror. "Ah, imposter!" he screamed, his voice ringing through the room. The kids swarmed in, delighted at the spectacle. The elf manager rushed forward, trying to restore order, but the chaos had already begun. Jovi, still watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but giggle at the absurdity of it all. She was bewildered, but she couldn't deny her curiosity about this strange, wide-eyed man. Walter sat behind his desk, the small package from Buddy resting untouched in front of him. It was wrapped in a gimbal's box, its edges slightly crumpled from the rough journey it had likely taken. He stared at the accompanying note with an unreadable expression. "Dad, this is for you because you are my special someone." A quiet sigh escaped him as he slowly began to unwrap it, carefully peeling back the paper to reveal what seemed an absurdly inappropriate gift. A red slinky nightie, its material shimmering faintly in the light, with fur around the chest area where the nipples would be. He blinked at it for a moment, bewildered. Just then the door swung open, and Deb stepped inside. Her eyes immediately fell on the box and its contents. Walter scrambled, his face flushing, as he hastily tried to hide the nightie behind his desk. "Hey, what's that?" Deb asked, a teasing smile tugging at her lips. "What's what?" Walter stammered, fumbling with the box, trying to cover up the nightie with the flimsy piece of paper. "Intercom!" he barked out quickly, almost too quickly. Deb paused, raising an eyebrow, and then left without further comment, though Walter could see her amused expression lingering as she closed the door behind her. His heart still racing, Walter turned his attention back to the box. Beneath the nightie he discovered a card, an old photograph of a much younger version of himself with a smiling girlfriend. On the back of it there was a crayon drawing, unmistakably by Buddy. Before he could dwell on it, the intercom buzzed. "Walter, the police are on line 1. Deb's voice crackled through. Walter's brow furrowed. "The police." He grabbed the phone, almost knocking it over in his haste. "Hello? My son? Michael? Is he okay?" He paused, listening intently to the voice on the other end. "An elf? He's not my— Wait, hold him there. I'll be right down." As Walter hung up, Deb popped her head through the door again. "What's going on?" "Nothing. I need to go," Walter replied quickly, trying to appear casual. "I need to swing by my apartment real quick. They're delivering a chair." "A police chair?" Deb quipped with a sly grin. "It's a regular chair. Okay, cancel my appointments." At the police station, the cold, sterile air seemed to cling to everything. Buddy sat on his cot, his face streaked with tears. He sniffled. rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to stop the torrent of emotions threatening to pour out. The cell around him was oppressive, stark and unforgiving. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across the room. Suddenly, Buddy buried his face in the pillow, unable to hold back his sobs any longer. The sound echoed through the cell, raw and vulnerable. Beside him, a convict on the other side of the room sat up, staring at Buddy with a mixture of confusion and disdain. But then, something strange happened. The convict's own tears began to spill, his face contorting in silent grief as he too succumbed to the overwhelming sadness. They sat in that shared sorrow for a moment, two strangers brought together by a moment of unexpected vulnerability. The door to the cell clanged open with a metallic groan, and Buddy's head shot up at the sound. Walter stood there framed in the doorway, his figure tense but resolute. "Dad!" Buddy cried, his voice cracking with emotion. He quickly wiped his face, trying to appear more composed. Walter stepped inside, the convict hastily wiping his own tears away. For a moment the two men exchanged an awkward glance before the convict slid back to the edge of his cot, trying to act tough. But his sniffles betrayed him. "Let's go," Walter said, his voice rough, pulling Buddy toward him by the arm. Buddy beamed, his face lighting up. "I'm so happy. I knew you'd come. I love that you came, Dad. Know how much I love you?" He spread his arms wide. "This much. Except my arms would have to be way longer, like pterodactyl wings." Walter stopped walking and turned to look at him. His jaw tightened as the frustration began to bubble up. "All right, pal. Who the heck are you and what's your problem?" "I'm Buddy, your son." Buddy's smile was unwavering, full of hope. "I already have a son," Walter snapped, his voice tinged with disbelief. Buddy tilted his head, his expression faltering for only a moment. "Then who am I?" Walter pulled the crayon drawing out of his pocket and held it up. "Where did you get this picture?" "Papa Elf gave it to me," Buddy replied innocently. Walter grabbed Buddy by the lapels, shaking him slightly. "Is this some kind of game? What do you want, money?" Buddy flinched, his eyes wide with fear, but he didn't back down. "I just wanted to meet you, and I thought that maybe you might want to meet Mo." Walter's grip loosened slightly as he processed the raw honesty in Buddy's words. He studied him, his anger beginning to melt into something more complicated, something that hovered between disbelief and pity. "You really believe this, don't you?" Walter muttered, his voice softer now. Buddy nodded eagerly. "I thought we could make gingerbread houses and eat cookie dough and go ice skating and hold hands. I'm sorry if I made you mad." Walter's expression softened even more, though the conflict was still apparent. "Come with me." They walked out together, their silhouettes moving away from the camera. Buddy reached out to hold Walter's hand, but Walter kept his hands tucked firmly in his coat pockets, ignoring the gesture. Buddy's hand hung in the air, waiting, but then Walter abruptly slapped it down. The sound echoed in the quiet street. An hour later, Buddy sat on an examining table in a pediatrician's office. Walter stood by, arms crossed, watching him carefully. In the background, a skull sat on a shelf, its empty gaze fixed on them. Buddy, oblivious to Walter's gaze, reached into a jar of cotton balls and began eating them one by one, chewing them rapidly like they were candy. "Don't eat those," Walter ordered, trying to stop him. But Buddy faked him out, stuffing another cotton ball into his mouth before Walter could grab his arm. "Am I sick?" "Yes," Walter snapped, his patience wearing thin. He paused for a beat, then added, "But that's not why we're here. We're here to test whether you're my son or not." Buddy looked down at the paper covering the table, confused. "Why am I sitting on paper?" Without waiting for an answer, Buddy yanked the roll of paper, spilling it out everywhere. The doctor and Walter scrambled to stop the mess, but the three of them got tangled up in the chaos. The doctor sighed, shaking his head. "So it's clean for each patient that comes in. Try to sit still. I'm going to perform something called a finger prick." "Finger prick!" Buddy exclaimed with excitement. "Can I wear your headlamp?" The doctor shot him a firm glance. No. Why? Just sit still. Buddy's curiosity wasn't sated. Why is there a skeleton on the wall? I don't know, but there just is, the doctor replied, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism. Buddy squinted at the skeleton. What's his name? He doesn't have a name, Walter snapped, exasperated. If I squint, he looks like a pirate flag, Buddy said, grinning. Ah, the doctor pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly overwhelmed. Walter, I can't do this if he's going to keep moving around. I'm sorry, Ben. Buddy, please, Walter pleaded, trying to regain some control. Buddy, whispering, muttered, he got mad at me. The doctor gave Buddy's finger a quick, sharp prick, and Buddy let out an ear-piercing scream. Ah! He bolted up from the table, shoving the doctor aside and stumbling around, clutching his finger in pain. Bootstraps! Snow flickers! Son of a cobbler! Buddy yelled, a string of nonsensical exclamations pouring from his mouth. In the waiting room, Buddy sat still for a moment, clutching a cotton ball to his finger. Without warning, he popped it into his mouth and chewed it like candy. He looked over at a little girl playing with her doll. Her mother was busy filling out paperwork with the nurse. My finger has a heartbeat, Buddy announced, holding up his injured hand. The little girl, without a hint of surprise, replied, It won't hurt so much after a little. What's your name? Buddy, he said proudly. I'm Carolyn. Buddy grinned. And what do you want for Christmas? A Susie talks a lot. Buddy nodded sagely. I'll put in a good word with the big man. Carolyn eyed him curiously. Thanks, your costume is pretty. Oh, it's not a costume, Buddy explained. I'm an elf. Well, I'm a human, technically, but I was raised by elves. Carolyn blinked. Oh, I'm a human raised by humans. Cool, Buddy replied, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. In the doctor's office, Walter paced nervously, waiting for the results. Well? He asked, his voice tight with anticipation. The doctor hesitated before speaking. Well, it's a b-boy. Walter's face drained of color, the words crashing over him like a cold wave. It's impossible, he whispered, feeling his knees weaken. Is the test ever wrong? No, the doctor replied, his voice solemn. Walter took a shaky breath, trying to hold himself together. Oh my God, what am I supposed to do? You saw the guy, he's certifiably insane. The doctor nodded, his expression softening. Walter, I've read about some things that suggest Buddy's behavior isn't necessarily that unusual. The man skips, Walter said, his voice low and incredulous. Rare, but there have been documented cases of people like your son, the doctor replied. Walter's eyes narrowed as he absorbed this new information. His name's Buddy, the doctor nodded. Buddy's been denied a proper childhood with you. It's possible he may feel he was never fully nurtured, causing an alternative personality to develop. An elf? Walter asked incredulously. Yes, the doctor replied. I think he's trying to return to a position of childlike dependency. Walter clenched his fists. So what do I do? Get him pills or something? The doctor sighed. I think what he really needs is you. This is an extreme case. A rejection now could be especially traumatic. Walter let out a low groan. So what do you want me to do, breastfeed him? The doctor gave him a serious look. What if you let him visit you, meet the family, that sort of thing? It may help him feel like he's a part of your life. He's your son, Walter. He's not going to just go away. Walter found Emily outside her office that evening, locking up for the day. He stood there at the bottom of the steps, hands in his pockets, trying to appear casual as she turned and saw him. What are you doing here? Emily asked, her voice laced with confusion. I was in the neighborhood, Walter said, his voice a little too upbeat. I thought I'd walk you home. Emily raised an eyebrow. You thought you'd walk me home? They began walking together, the evening air crisp around them. Is that so weird? Walter asked, glancing sideways at her. Emily looked at him, a little smile tugging at her lips. I've worked here for 4 years. You've never walked me anywhere. Well, it's a nice night, he replied, trying to brush it off. What's wrong? She asked, sensing something was off. Why does something have to be wrong? I just said it's a nice night, really. Okay, I'm sorry, she said, her tone softening. Thanks, this is really nice. Walter let out a small sigh. Okay, something's a little wrong. Later that night, after Walter had filled Emily in on everything, she couldn't hide her surprise. Oh, God, it's wonderful, Walter. You have a son. Walter shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Wonderful. That's one way to put it. Oh, come on, she teased. This is incredible. It may be a little complicated, but it's nothing we can't handle. Walter leaned back, rubbing his eyes. He thinks he's an elf. Emily's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. I'm sorry, what? Walter pulled open the door to the apartment, revealing the chaos inside. Buddy had been busy. Very busy. The apartment was a snow globe come to life, a recycled winter wonderland with garlands strung haphazardly across the ceiling and walls. Construction paper murals decorated the space in an almost manic display. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, stunned by the sight. Meanwhile, Buddy was in the kitchen, devouring frosting straight from the bowl with abandon. Buddy? Walter called, his voice strained. Buddy turned, frosting still dripping from his chin. This is Emily, he said with enthusiasm. Emily, a little flustered, swallowed hard and managed, Emery! Buddy, undeterred, leapt up to give her a massive hug. Walter hasn't told me anything about you. As the evening wore on, they all sat around the dining table eating spaghetti. Buddy animatedly told tales of his journey through the 7 levels of the candy cane forest and past the sea of swirly-twirly gumdrops. Walter watched him with a mix of amusement and disbelief as Buddy drank an entire 2-liter bottle of Coke in one go. So where exactly have you been for the last 30 years? Emily asked, trying to make sense of it all. The North Pole, Walter replied, his voice deadpan. He's an elf. Buddy, ever the enthusiast, grinned. He's right. Can you pass the maple syrup, pretty please? Emily blinked, slightly thrown off. I'm sorry, I didn't set out any syrup. It's spaghetti. Buddy shrugged. That's okay. I think I have some. From his breast pocket, Buddy produced a small bottle of syrup and began pouring it over his pasta, much to Walter and Michael's shared disgust. You like sugar, huh? Emily asked, trying to make sense of it all. Buddy nodded eagerly. Is there sugar in syrup? Emily blinked. Yes. Then yes, Buddy confirmed. We elves try to stick to the 4 basic food groups: candy, candy canes, candy corns, and syrup. Emily's still trying to take it all in. Asked, so, will you be staying with us then? Walter stiffened, giving Emily a sharp look. You mean I can stay? Buddy asked eagerly, his eyes wide. Walter, aghast, muttered, Emily. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the cluttered dining room. At the table, Emily picked at her plate of spaghetti, which was more of a chaotic feast than anything resembling a meal. The table was set like some deranged Thanksgiving celebration, and Buddy, wearing his oversized green tights, flitted around the kitchen, his energy palpable. So, will you be staying with us then? Emily asked, her voice casual as she glanced up from her breakfast. Buddy, his mouth half full of spaghetti, blinked in surprise. You mean I can stay? Of course, Buddy, Emily replied quickly, waving off the question as if it was an absurd thought. How long do you think you'll be with us? Buddy chewed thoughtfully, eyes gleaming with excitement. Well, I hadn't really planned it out, but I was thinking like forever. Walter, who had been quietly sipping his coffee across the room, suddenly snapped. Emily! Emily turned to him, eyes widening at his sharp tone. What? May I speak with you in the kitchen for a moment? Walter's voice dropped to a frustrated whisper, barely controlled. Emily sighed, pushing her chair back. Sure. Excuse me, Buddy. Left alone, Buddy looked over at Michael, sitting stiffly across from him. Michael didn't even glance in his direction. Buddy frowned and shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the room. Then, without warning, he let out a tremendous burp, long and loud, the kind that made the walls shake. Wow, did you hear that? Buddy grinned, clearly pleased with himself. Michael didn't respond, his gaze fixed on his phone, unaffected. Buddy watched him for a moment longer before letting out another huff of air, not caring about the silence. In the kitchen, the conversation between Walter and Emily was heated, though their voices were low to avoid disturbing Buddy. "Are you crazy?" "He can't stay here," Walter hissed, pacing in frustration. "Clearly he has some serious issues," Emily replied, her tone softer but still firm. "We can't just kick him out into the snow." "Why not? He loves the snow. He told me 15 times. Walter shot back, a trace of sarcasm in his voice. Emily crossed her arms, looking out the kitchen window. "Seriously, Walter, he's alone in New York. What's he supposed to do?" Walter clenched his fists. "That's his problem. He's your son," Emily reminded him, her voice calm but insistent. "That means it's our problem now." Back in the dining room, Buddy sat with Michael, the tension thick in the air. Buddy squirmed in his chair, trying to find something to say. He finally broke the silence with an over-the-top declaration. "I love you." Michael didn't even look up. "Eat me!" Buddy blinked, startled for a second, before an impish grin spread across his face. "Eat you? Okay." He stood up, roaring like a lion, his hands miming exaggerated claws. "I'm a lion! Roar! Chomp!" Michael rolled his eyes unimpressed, while Buddy flopped back into his chair with a dramatic sigh. Later that evening, Buddy lay on the living room couch, already tucked in beneath an absurdly colorful blanket. Walter stood nearby, reluctant and clearly annoyed. "Good night, Dad," Buddy said with a smile. Walter grunted in reply. "Good night." Buddy's voice grew quieter, almost pleading. "Tuck me in?" "What?" Walter's frustration bubbled to the surface. "I can't fall asleep if I'm not tucked in," Buddy explained, his eyes wide with innocence. Walter rubbed his temples. "I'm not tucking you in." Buddy looked up at him, still hopeful. "I promise I'll go right to sleep." Walter's resolve cracked. "Fine." He sighed dramatically, bending down to tuck Buddy in. The second Walter's hands were free, Buddy jumped up from the couch, his hands raised in the air. "Tickle fight!" Walter lunged at him, trying to push him back down onto the couch, his temper flaring. Nobody stopped. "Sorry," Buddy said, raising his hands in surrender, though his grin remained. "Just lay down and go to sleep, okay?" Walter muttered, exhausted. Buddy's voice came from beneath the covers, soft and playful. "Do you want to hear a story?" Walter's face tightened. "No. When this light goes off, you are not getting up. Understand?" Buddy nodded, his voice small. "I understand." Walter flicked the light off, and as the darkness settled, he turned to leave. "Good night." From the dark room, Buddy's voice floated out, faint but persistent. "D-Dad?" Walter paused, irritated. "What?" "Do you love me?" Walter's patience thinned. "Yeah, sure. Now go to sleep." Buddy, satisfied with the answer, let out a contented sigh. "How much do you love me? Like on a scale from 1 to 10? Walter rolled his eyes, a small chuckle escaping. "Well, I haven't known you for very long, but I would say my feelings are significant." Buddy smiled, the word rolling around in his mind, soaking in the validation. "Significant," he whispered to himself. Walter, his voice strained, replied, "Good night." With a final flick of the switch, the room was bathed in darkness. The door clicked shut, leaving Buddy alone in his thoughts. The silence of the night was broken by Buddy's voice once again calling out in the dark. "Dad?" He waited. No answer. "Dad?" Still nothing. "Dad?" The door to the room swung open with a loud creak, and light flooded into the space, harsh and sudden. "Walter?" Buddy's face split into a grin, thrilled by his own antics. Walter, wide-eyed and startled, had spilled his coffee in the doorway. His hands shook. "What?" Buddy, his voice delightfully mischievous, yelled back, "Ah!" Walter slammed the door shut with a vengeance, the darkness quickly swallowing the room once again. "Dad?" Buddy's voice was soft but hopeful. The next morning, the kitchen was a chaotic war zone of oddities. The stove was on, the smell of burnt spaghetti mingling with the strange sweetness of candy. Emily sat at the table, eyeing the odd breakfast Buddy had prepared. "This sure is something," she said, a note of surprise in her voice. "I'm usually the one making breakfast." Buddy bounced around, clearly in his element. Want some more spaghetti? Emily, a little confused but too tired to protest, nodded. Sure, why not? Buddy, ever the host, piled a mountain of spaghetti onto her plate, sprinkling it generously with candy snow caps. Emily looked at the plate, unsure how to feel, but forced a smile. So how'd you sleep last night? She asked, taking a tentative bite. Buddy grinned. Great, I got a full 40 minutes and still had time to build a rocking horse. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief as she noticed the ornate rocking horse standing in the corner of the room, its hand-painted trim catching the light. My gosh, you built that? She asked, astonished. Where did you get the wood? Walter's voice rang out from the living room, laced with confusion. Why is the TV on the ground? The camera panned to reveal the entertainment center, now a pile of scattered wood and broken pieces. Sawdust lay scattered across the floor. Walter stalked into the kitchen, his eyes filled with disbelief. What the hell happened in here? Emily, unfazed, smiled. Good morning, honey. She leaned in to kiss him before adding, Buddy made us breakfast. Isn't that nice? Walter blinked at the spaghetti on the table, his mind racing, trying to process everything at once. He packed us lunches, too. Buddy proudly placed 3 brown paper bags on the table, each one carefully labeled in neat calligraphy with the family's names. Well, Emily said, standing up, I gotta run. Thanks for breakfast, Buddy. She kissed him on the cheek, her smile wide, before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. Bye, Emily, Buddy called, watching her leave with wide eyes. He then grabbed a ladle, lifting an absurd amount of spaghetti into his bowl. So, how many scoops? He asked, grinning up at Walter. Walter rubbed his face with his hands, clearly done with the madness. I'm going to stick with coffee for now. Just as Walter was about to take a sip, Michael entered the kitchen, his face blank. He didn't spare a glance at the strange scene unfolding before him. I need my allowance, Michael muttered, walking straight to Walter. Did you do the recycling? Walter asked, not meeting Michael's eyes. Yeah, I did, okay? Michael snapped back, already grabbing the $20 bill Walter handed him. Buddy, ever the observer, looked between the two of them, his head tilting. How come you guys don't hug? We always hug in the morning. Walter froze, blinking. We hugged earlier. Michael, playing along, nodded. Yeah, we hugged already. Bye. Bye. Buddy waved enthusiastically. As Michael left, Walter turned his attention back to Buddy, who was still bouncing in place, eager for the next thing. Listen, Buddy, Walter began, trying to keep his tone serious. I wanted to talk to you. Buddy's eyes sparkled, and he reached for an Etch-a sketch. Good. I wanted to talk to you, too. I've planned our whole day. He held up the Etch-a sketch where his plans were drawn in colorful detail. Snow angels, ice skating, and, of course, a grand finale of snuggling. Walter looked at the list, his face pinched with disbelief. Buddy, I have to go to work, Walter said, his voice tight with annoyance. Buddy's face fell slightly, but he rallied quickly. And another thing, Walter continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. If you're going to be staying here, you should think about getting rid of the costume. We've got neighbors, people around here, you know. Buddy looked down at his green tights, a frown tugging at his lips. I've worn this my whole life. Walter sighed, frustration mounting. Yeah, well, you're not in the North Pole anymore. Buddy's lips quivered as he absorbed the information. Walter crossed his arms, his voice softening a little. You said you wanted to make me happy, right? Buddy nodded, eager, more than anything, then lose the tights as soon as possible. Buddy's face lit up with acceptance. As soon as possible? Walter nodded firmly. As soon as possible. Buddy sighed, then saluted with an exaggerated gesture. Yes, Papa. Walter turned to pour himself coffee, his back to Buddy, and then in a flash, Buddy pulled off his tights, standing there with nothing but a mischievous grin. Behind him, Emily re-entered the kitchen, her eyes widening in horror. I almost forgot! Walter, turning in shock, stared at Buddy from behind. Ah! Buddy, laughing, shrieked in delight. Ah! The scene, chaotic and unexpected, continued in a blur of frantic movements and wild energy. Walter's boots struck the sidewalk with a steady rhythm. the morning air sharp against his skin as he walked to work. His mind was already preoccupied with the day's task when his cell phone buzzed in his coat pocket. He pulled it out with one hand, never breaking stride. "Walter Hobbs," he answered, his voice brisk, ready to get back to business. "Buddy OS?" The voice crackled on the other end, full of excitement. "It worked! It's you!" Walter furrowed his brow, glancing at the phone screen. "How'd you get this number?" The voice on the other side practically vibrated with glee. "Emily left an emergency list." Walter's face tightened, a note of concern in his voice. "Is there an emergency?" From the other end came a loud, exaggerated noise that almost made Walter wince, like metal scraping against metal. "There's a horrible sound coming from the evil box by the window. It sounds like this area could—" Walter yanked the phone away from his ear, wincing as the screech reverberated in his eardrum. "It's not evil, it's the radiator. The heat makes noise when it comes on." The phone was silent for a moment, then Buddy's voice came back, sheepish. "No, it's not." "Wait, yes, it is. You were right. Everything's fine." Walter sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm hanging up now." "Okay, I love you," Buddy said quickly. "I'll call you in 5 minutes." "I love you." Walter let out an exasperated breath. "You don't need to call me, Buddy, okay?" "Good idea. You call me." Walter pinched the bridge of his nose. "Okay, I'm hanging up." Buddy's voice came through again, chipper as ever. "I have a present for you when you get home." "I'm hanging up," Walter said, cutting him off. "I love you." Buddy's voice rang out one final time as the phone clicked in Walter's hand. The schoolyard erupted with the shrill voices of dozens of kids spilling out into the street, laughing and chatting as they broke for the day. Among the throng of students, Michael stood with his friends, the weight of another long school day hanging over him. Then he heard it, a voice calling his name across the street. "Michael! Michael!" Michael froze, his face turning a shade of red that could rival a tomato. "Oh, man," he muttered under his breath, his fingers curling into fists. He reluctantly turned, eyes scanning the crowd before they landed on Buddy, bounding through traffic like an excited puppy. "It's me, your brother," Buddy waved frantically. "Hey, Michael!" The other kids took notice, snickering under their breath. The laughter was like nails on a chalkboard to Michael, who took a quick step back, trying to hide his embarrassment. "Michael, wait up!" Buddy called after him, oblivious to the scene he was creating. Michael didn't turn back. He was moving away quickly, his shoulders tight with the strain of trying to avoid the attention Buddy was drawing. The sound of Buddy's voice still echoing behind him was a constant reminder that there was no escape. Michael walked briskly through the park, his pace quickening with each step. The trees, now dusted with snow, seemed to lean in toward him, silent witnesses to his frustration. Behind him, Buddy was a few steps off, trailing just far enough to not be an immediate threat, but not far enough to be completely out of sight. He was attempting to hide behind trees, though not very well. Finally, Michael spun around, his face hard with resolve. "Leave!" he shouted. Buddy, slightly taken aback by the force of the command, hesitated before responding. "How about I leave, then you count to 10 and come find me?" "This isn't a game, Spaz," Michael snapped. "Leave now. For real." Buddy's face fell, a visible sadness creeping into his eyes. "You really want me to leave?" "Yes," Michael said, his voice cracking with the weight of his words. Buddy's expression turned downcast. "Oh, okay, I'll leave then. I'm sorry." Just then, a snowball struck Michael square in the shoulder. His eyes widened in shock, but before he could react, another hit him in the head with a solid thump. "Ow, peanut brittle!" Buddy yelled, stumbling backward. "Son of a nutcracker!" A barrage of snowballs followed, and Michael and Buddy dove behind a fallen tree trunk, using it as cover from the relentless assault. The snow missiles slammed against the barricade with satisfying thuds, but it was only a matter of time before they would be overwhelmed. "Die!" Buddy shouted, his eyes wide with determination. Michael's eyes flickered to the snowballs flying in their direction. "There are too many of them!" Buddy's grin grew wider, his confidence unwavering. "We can do this! Make as many snowballs as you can!" Michael quickly scooped up 2 handfuls of snow, packing them together into hard, dense projectiles. He glanced over at Buddy. To his amazement, Buddy had already created a small mountain of snowballs, at least 30, ready to go. "Ready?" Buddy asked, excitement sparkling in his eyes. "Yeah," Michael replied, though he didn't share Buddy's certainty. From behind their makeshift fortress, Buddy began lobbing snowballs with a fury. Each one hit its target with a precision that could only be compared to a fastball pitcher in his prime. The snowballs exploded against their targets with satisfying accuracy, guts, butts, and faces taking the brunt of the attack. But then Michael made a mistake. He stood up to fire his own snowball, his head exposed for just a moment. "No!" Buddy cried, his voice rising in alarm. Before Michael could react, the massive snowball came hurtling toward him, its trajectory deadly. Time seemed to slow as it flew through the air. Without missing a beat, Buddy fired his own snowball. It collided with the incoming projectile midair, bursting both of them into a cloud of snow. They both dropped to the ground, panting. Buddy, not missing a beat, stood up again, a gleam in his eyes. "He's bunkered in. I'm going to flank around from the east. If I don't make it, tell my dad I love him." And with that, Buddy took off, charging toward the enemy lines. Michael, adrenaline pumping, followed close behind. Walter sat at his desk, doing the usual shuffle of paperwork. He hit the intercom button, his voice professional. "Can you bring me in a bottle of water, please?" There was a brief pause before Deb's voice responded, slightly clipped. "Fulton Greenway is on his way in." Walter's face drained of color and his heart skipped a beat. "Fulton Greenway? Why didn't you tell me?" "He just showed up." "What size water? When's he coming in?" Walter asked, his voice tightening with anxiety. "Now," Deb replied, her tone cool. Walter glanced at himself in the mirror, his fingers tugging at his collar, checking his reflection for any stray nose hairs. The door to his office swung open, and a man stepped in, exuding authority with every step he took. Fulton Greenway, the cutthroat owner of Greenway Press, appeared like a storm cloud looming over Walter. "Fulton! What a great surprise!" Walter forced a smile, his voice full of forced warmth. Greenway gave him a curt nod. "I haven't seen you since the retreat." "You're looking good." "Thanks, you too." "So, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Walter asked, trying to mask his growing discomfort. Greenway tossed a book onto the desk with a thud. "Well, to be honest, I got a call from my niece." Walter's brow furrowed. "Your niece? I don't think I've met her." Greenway's lips twitched in a smile that was more of a smirk. "She's 6. He slapped the book, the puppy and the pigeon, on the desk with a little too much force, as if to emphasize the weight of the moment. Walter's stomach dropped. "She wants to know how a certain puppy and a certain pigeon escaped the clutches of a certain evil witch," Greenway said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Walter blinked, his mind racing. "Believe me, we're already looking at new printers. This one's obviously gotten sloppy." Greenway raised an eyebrow, holding up the proof signed by Walter. "Maybe it isn't the printer who's gotten sloppy." Walter laughed nervously, leaning back in his chair. "What a disaster, huh? 25 years in publishing, never seen anything like it. Well, I guess you can't bat 1,000, right?" Greenway was unamused. "I got news for you. This book still would have tanked even if those 2 pages were missing. I read it. Hell, I wish all the pages were missing." Walter's face paled. He adjusted his seat, trying to keep his composure. "Have you seen the numbers from this quarter?" "They're in," Greenway said, holding up a sheet of paper with the damning statistics. Walter's voice faltered. "That good, huh?" Greenway didn't sugarcoat anything. "The pigeon and the friggin' puppy is tanking hard, Hobbs. My people estimate we'll be posting a -8 for this quarter." "A -8 cannot happen." Walter's mind raced, but he tried to maintain a calm facade. "We'll bounce back. We always do." Greenway's lips pressed into a thin line. "We're not going to bounce back. We're going to get a new book before the end of the Q quarter." Walter blinked in shock. Before the end of this quarter? Greenway nodded, his eyes steely. I'll be back in town on the 24th. At that time, I'd love to hear in great detail exactly what your plans are for this new book. But that's Christmas Eve, Walter said, the weight of the day finally beginning to settle in. Greenway shrugged, indifferent. And? Walter forced a smile. Hey, no problem. It'll be fun to have you in the loop. Buddy and Michael wandered through Gimbel's, the toy section, their latest battleground. Buddy pegged Michael with a dodgeball, and Michael responded in kind, sending the ball flying back. Hey, look at this. It's a big mosquito, Michael exclaimed, pointing to a toy in the display. Buddy tilted his head. What's a mosquito? Michael grinned at the opportunity to impart some wisdom. They land on your arm, then stick their needle face down through your skin, suck your blood out, and then fly away. Buddy's face twisted into an expression of horror. That's a scary toy. It's not just a toy, Michael said with a shrug. They're real. They're everywhere in the summer. Buddy recoiled slightly. Oh, my God. They moved on, heading toward the area where Buddy had set up his version of Santaland. The awkwardly altered sign now read, Welcome, Santa. Love, Gimbels. Buddy's voice softened. I wish Dad were here. Michael shot him a sideways glance. Buddy smiled wistfully. He's the greatest dad in the world. Michael scoffed, his tone sarcastic. Are you kidding? He's the worst dad in the world. All he does is work. Buddy's brow furrowed. Working is fun. Michael shook his head, frustration leaking into his words. Not the way he does it. All he cares about is the money. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about anybody. Buddy's voice was soft, almost apologetic. Well, he is on the naughty list. And then, through the crowd, they both spotted her, Jovi. She was beautiful from a distance, but up close, she was even more stunning. Michael raised an eyebrow. You like her? Buddy stammered, caught off guard. Like who? The girl you're staring at, Michael teased. Buddy turned a deeper shade of red, but he didn't try to hide it. Yes. Michael grinned. Why don't you ask her out? Buddy's mouth opened and closed in confusion. Out to where? Meanwhile, Jovi had spotted Buddy. A shy wave followed as she started walking toward them. Buddy froze, his panic almost palpable. We should leave. I need to leave. Don't leave, Michael urged. Ask her out. Buddy's voice quivered. Out? Michael leaned in, whispering as if revealing some great secret. On a date, you know, to eat food. Buddy's eyes widened as Jovi came closer. His words were clumsy, nervous. Food? Jovi was almost upon them. She smiled, walking straight toward Buddy. Well, look who it is. Buddy blinked, trying to compose himself. Hi, Jovi. This is... But Michael had already disappeared. Buddy was alone. That's my brother Michael over there, he said quickly. Jovi smiled. I was wondering if I'd ever see you again. So did Gimbels give you your job back? Buddy's face lit up, though there was a hint of mischief in his eyes. No, but it worked out pretty good. They gave me a restraining order. Jovi chuckled, shaking her head. You really should get out of here. Buddy's eyes softened, his voice turning earnest. But I really wanted to see you. You're beautiful, and I feel warm when I'm around you. You make my tongue swell up. Jovi's face flushed with embarrassment, but she smiled. You are the weirdest guy I've ever met in my life. Buddy, clueless but undeterred, tilted his head. Weird like... good? Jovi smiled softly, amused. I haven't decided. Buddy took a deep breath, summoning all his courage. So, do you want to eat food? Jovi raised an eyebrow. Do I want to eat food? Buddy winked. You know, the sea code. Jovi paused, letting the awkwardness slide. I just took my lunch break. Buddy deflated, his excitement dying down. Oh, right, I follow. But I'm free Thursday night, Jovi added, her smile warm and genuine. Buddy's face broke into a grin so wide it seemed impossible. And then, without warning, he let out a loud, triumphant yell. Yes! The Hobbs living room buzzed with a frantic energy. Walter walked through the door, his tired eyes immediately drawn to the sight of Buddy and Michael struggling with a mammoth tree. an enormous 14-foot-tall Christmas tree that seemed to scrape the ceiling as they wedged it into place in the corner. The sheer size of it was enough to make Walter's head spin. "What the hell is that?" Walter demanded, his voice rising in disbelief. "A Christmas tree," Michael announced with a wide grin as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "A Christmas tree?" Walter echoed, incredulous. Buddy beamed at him from behind the giant tree, looking every bit the picture of holiday cheer. His smile, however, didn't seem to elicit a matching one from Walter. "Buddy chopped it down in the park," Michael added, his eyes wide with excitement, proud of their unconventional choice for a Christmas tree. Buddy, his hand still gripping the massive trunk, gave Walter an innocent smile, but Walter's face remained frozen, lips pressed in tight disapproval. This was not the Christmas cheer Walter had in mind. Moments later, in the bedroom, the conversation was just as heated, though less physically chaotic. Michael stood at the edge of the bed, a storm of words swirling between him and Emily. "I don't know what you're so worked up about," Emily said, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "They're just having a little fun." "Fun?" Walter's voice was sharp, the frustration building. "Felonies are fun now? I thought felonies were felonies." Emily rolled her eyes. "Okay, the tree thing was bad. We'll plan another one. But at least Michael's happy for once." She let the words hang in the air, her tone softening as she tried to make him see reason. "It's amazing what a little attention will do." Walter's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his gaze. "What's that supposed to mean?" Emily crossed her arms, her voice cool but firm. "Well, you haven't exactly been there for him lately. He's a kid, Walter. He's not going to raise himself." Walter's face reddened, and his voice rose with a mix of anger and hurt. "Oh, so let's allow a deranged elf man to raise him. Great idea. Maybe we should pull Michael out of school so they can commit felonies full time." Emily shook her head, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I think you're jealous." "Jealous? Of Buddy? The man's wearing tea tights?" Downstairs in the living room, Buddy was already in the midst of his next project. The buzz of the drill echoed through the room as he worked to secure the tree's trunk to the floor. The loud sound seemed to make the room shudder with every turn. After a moment, he stood back, admiring his work like a proud inventor, eyeing a newly crafted machine. He was clearly thinking about his next move, though it was anyone's guess what that might be. His eyes darted toward a mini trampoline in the corner of the room. "Ready?" Buddy asked, focusing intently on the trampoline and the star he held in his hand. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked, watching with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Buddy grinned mischievously, his energy infectious. "What's fun about a ladder?" With no further hesitation, he took off toward the trampoline, leaping onto it with wild abandon. His feet hit the surface, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Then, with an almost comical lack of grace, Buddy launched himself into the air at a sharp angle, his body flying wildly toward the nearest wall. Bam! The crash sounded like it had shaken the whole house. "I'm okay," Buddy's voice called from behind the couch, muffled but cheerful. "I found a quarter." Back in the bedroom, the sound of Buddy's crash echoed up the stairs, forcing a new round of tension between Walter and Emily. "What was that noise?" Walter asked, his eyes narrowing, already knowing the answer. "Sounded like Buddy slamming into the wall and falling behind the couch," Emily replied with a resigned sigh. "That guy's a liability." Walter's voice was dripping with annoyance now. "There's no way we're leaving him alone here tomorrow. He'll trash the place. Maybe you should take tomorrow off and, watch him." Emily met his gaze, her expression tight. "I can't just take off work. I'm going upstate tomorrow for budget meetings." And Walter's frustration flared. "Well, I can't stay home. I'm one bad pitch away from getting fired." There was a brief, heavy silence before Emily gave a suggestion that sounded even more absurd than the tree incident. "Why don't you take him to work with you?" Walter stared at her, aghast. "Take him to work with me?" "Yeah," she said, nodding. "I bet he'd like it." "Absolutely never. The next day, Walter stood in the elevator, a mixture of dread and disbelief on his face as Buddy stood beside him, wearing a suit that, for all intents and purposes, made him look like an actual professional. They stepped off the elevator and into the office where a few co-workers were already gathered. "Hey, Walter," Jack greeted, nodding to him. "Hey, Jack," Walter replied curtly, trying to keep his frustration in check. "Hello, Jack," Buddy beamed, practically bouncing in his enthusiasm. Another co-worker, Sarah, waved at Walter. "Hey, Walter." Buddy didn't miss a beat. "Hi, Sarah. I love that purple dress. It's purply." Walter could feel the heat rising in his face. "Could you at least lose that damn hat?" he whispered, his voice tight with embarrassment. Buddy shrugged, completely unfazed. "I like the hat." Inside Walter's office, things were no less chaotic. Deb entered with his morning cup of coffee, only to be immediately overwhelmed by Buddy's exuberance. "Good morning, Deb. You have a very pretty face. You should be on a Christmas card," Buddy said, grinning widely. Deb stared at him, momentarily speechless. Thanks," she said awkwardly, before quickly retreating from the room. Walter, meanwhile, was trying to get some semblance of work done, but it was no use. Buddy was everywhere, grabbing books off the shelf, flicking through them only to declare them boring moments later. Buddy's voice broke into Walter's thoughts. "Why is your name on the door?" "I bought that door," Walter explained with a sigh. "My name's there so no one else steals it." Buddy tilted his head, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Is that a joke, Dad?" Walter hesitated before answering, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Yes, Buddy's gaze lit up. "This is your office, isn't it?" Walter gave a tired smile. "Well, how about that?" He's understanding sarcasm. The phone rang, and before Walter could get to it, Buddy grabbed it with lightning speed. "Buddy the elf! What's your favorite color?" Buddy answered in a single breath. Walter, half in panic, grabbed the phone back, hanging it up quickly. "Please don't touch anything," he muttered, his eyes darting around the room. Buddy, undeterred, asked, "Have you ever seen a mailroom before?" Walter's face softened, as if he was grasping at straws for a way to distract Buddy. "Mail from all over the world gets sorted all in one place, and some of the bins are shiny." Buddy's eyes grew wide with delight. Shiny. Buddy's foray into the mailroom was just the kind of chaos Walter should have expected. The deafening noise of machines, the yelling of workers, and the thumping of hip-hop music created a wild atmosphere. The young workers, dressed in tough attire, moved quickly and efficiently. "Welcome to the pit," the floor manager, Chuck, said with a grin, leading Buddy further into the action. Buddy's eyes were wide with excitement, despite the intimidating looks of Trey and Craig, two imposing men who stopped what they were doing to give Buddy a once-over. "All the mail comes out of the shooter," Chuck explained, clearly trying to get Buddy up to speed. "You scan it, find the right floor, and then shove it up the tube with the same number. Got it?" Buddy nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, I like tubes and canisters and numbers. This place reminds me of Santa's workshop. Except here it smells like mushrooms, and everyone wants to hurt me." Meanwhile, back in the conference room, Walter sat with the writers Eugene, Husky, and Morris. They were discussing their big pitch, the weight of the next few hours pressing on him. "So we've got Greenway coming in tomorrow," Walter began, his voice slightly strained. "Where are we at?" Eugene leaned forward, his enthusiasm palpable. "Well, Husky and I were brainstorming, and we came up with what I think is a pretty big idea." Husky's eyes gleamed. "You're going to love this." Morris gave a satisfied smile. "I heard it already, and I think it's fantastic." Walter, sensing the momentum, gestured for them to continue. "Okay, great. Let's hear it." Husky paused dramatically before speaking. "Picture this. We bring in Miles Finch." Walter's eyes narrowed, the name striking a chord. "The Miles Finch?" "The Golden Ghost," Eugene added, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile. "The one and only." Husky nodded vigorously. Morris joined in, his voice firm. "He's written more classics than Dr. Seuss. It may not be easy, but we think it's worth a shot." Walter stared at them, processing the idea. For a moment, it looked like he was about to erupt in frustration, but then something shifted in his expression. "I like it," he said, surprising himself. Later, back in the mailroom, Buddy was in his element. The tubes, the speed, the chaos, it was all second nature to him. His movements were almost a blur as he launched mail into the appropriate bins, humming a Christmas tune to himself as he worked. "On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me," he sang under his breath, completely immersed in the rhythm of his task. The sound of Trey's disapproving stare was unmistakable. "A partridge in a pear tree," Trey muttered dryly, causing Buddy to snap to attention. Back in the conference room, Walter was still trying to keep everything under control. He was on the phone with Miles Finch, finalizing the details of his arrival. "I'll give you 5 hours tomorrow, not a minute more," Miles Finch's voice crackled over the speakerphone. Walter let out a relieved breath. "Great!" But then the situation downstairs, whatever it was, started to escalate. "Deb, hang up!" Walter shouted. "Miles, stay on!" But Miles Finch was having none of it. "I do not hold! Do not put me on hold!" The tension was palpable as the chaos of the moment grew. With every word, Walter could feel himself being pulled deeper into a world of deadlines, strange characters, and unlikely chaos. Finally, after a long pause, Miles Finch spoke again. "I'll be there tomorrow, 71 degrees, he said, his tone final. Walter exhaled, relieved. "Thank you." And with that, the madness of the day seemed to settle into a strange new normal. The hum of voices filled the mailroom as Buddy's impromptu performance caught fire. It started with a few playful notes from him, but before long the entire room was wrapped in the spirit of Christmas. Laughter, cheers, and off-key singing reverberated against the walls as each worker eagerly took their turn. 11 pipers piping, Trey sang, his voice stretching for the higher notes. 10 lords a-leaping, Craig followed, throwing his hands in the air. 9 ladies dancing, lazy-eyed Creep added, swaying his body as if to demonstrate the moves. 8 maids milking, Gangbanger chimed in with a half-joking grin. 6 geese a-laying, Trey sang again, his energy catching on. They all shouted in unison, their voices rising in unrestrained joy. The entire room echoed with the familiar Christmas melody, each voice contributing to the crescendo of celebration. But amidst the revelry, one pair of eyes remained still, observing from the doorway. Walter stood quietly watching. The chorus gradually thinned as the workers began to notice him standing there. One by one they quieted down, their carefree energy faltering. Soon only Buddy remained, his enthusiasm unbroken. Buddy, still caught in the rhythm of the song, continued alone, his squat thrusts growing more exaggerated. On the 12th day of Christmas, my true love, Dee gave. He looked up, his bright grin fading just a little as he met his father's gaze. Walter didn't return the smile. Buddy's heart skipped, his breath catching in his chest, but he quickly masked it with a forced enthusiasm, completing his line, "Me." The room, now silent, turned its attention to the father and son. Buddy's chest tightened. He offered a hesitant, hopeful smile, but Walter's expression remained stone cold. Later, under the harsh city lights, Buddy stood in front of the buzzer panel of Jovi's apartment building. His hand hovered uncertainly over the buttons, his heart pounding in his chest as he searched for the name Jovi Davis. His finger trembled as he pressed the buzzer. "Woo!" The sound was jarring, startling him back. The momentary fear was only amplified as his eyes were caught by the window of the building filled with roasted Chinese ducks, their heads still attached. He recoiled for a moment, then steeled himself. A few seconds later, Jovi stepped out, looking as unbothered as ever, though she seemed surprised to see him standing there, her hand still on the door. "You look miraculous," Buddy stammered, taking her in with wide, adoring eyes. "Miraculous, thanks," she replied, her tone light but warm as they began walking together. "So, what do you feel like doing?" Buddy's face lit up as his heart swelled. "I have a few ideas." "Really?" Jovi asked, the faintest teasing note in her voice. "Sure," she answered, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. The night stretched on as Buddy and Jovi wandered through the city together, exchanging a quiet joy in each other's presence. At a cozy coffee shop, Jovi sat blindfolded, waiting, her senses heightened in anticipation as Buddy carefully set up a cup of coffee in front of her. "Don't look," he said playfully. "Just reach out and take a sip." Jovi smiled, unsure but intrigued. "What are you doing?" She reached out and took a tentative sip. Her expression remained unreadable as she set the cup down. "Well?" Buddy asked eagerly, watching her closely. "It tastes like a crappy cup of coffee," she said with a straight face, a grin threatening at the corners of her mouth. Buddy chuckled, amused. "Ha ha!" He removed the blindfold, revealing her face as she looked at the cup with mock distaste. "It is a crappy cup of coffee," she agreed with a laugh. Later, Buddy was in his element, running in circles around a revolving door, grinning widely as he did. He spun and spun, laughing with reckless abandon. Jovi watched, an amused smirk playing on her lips, as others around them sighed, and glanced impatiently at the whirling man. "Check out the size of this," Buddy said breathlessly, tugging at her arm and pulling her toward a massive, garishly decorated pine tree adorned with shimmering lights and ornaments. He pointed at it, eyes wide. "Can you believe it?" Jovi, unimpressed, simply shook her head. "Come with me." At Rockefeller Center, Buddy's excitement seemed to grow even more contagious. As Jovi led him around the corner, he stopped in his tracks, eyes widening as the giant Christmas tree was revealed before him, its massive branches adorned with glimmering lights. He exhaled in awe, his face lighting up with genuine wonder. "Wow, that looks wondrous," he breathed. For the first time, their smiles met in full sincerity, an unspoken bond passing between them. The two found themselves at an ice rink, the evening stretching before them as they clumsily skated. Jovi slid, her balance faltering, and bumped into Buddy. He retaliated, bumping her back, but she quickly escalated, checking him off his feet. They both tumbled to the ice, landing in a tangled heap. Jovi was on top, her face inches from his as they locked eyes. Buddy's heart thudded in his chest, and before he could stop himself, he pressed a quick kiss to her cheek. "Sorry," he muttered, slightly embarrassed. Jovi's lips twitched into a grin. "You missed." "I missed?" Buddy repeated, confused. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft as she leaned in, closing the gap between them. Their lips met in a kiss, deep and unhurried. Buddy's chest seemed to swell with emotion, his heart pounding in a rhythm he could hardly keep up with. The next day, Walter sat in the conference room, his fingers tapping nervously on the polished wood of the table. His writers sat around him, a tense silence hanging in the air. They waited for their consultant to arrive, the pressure mounting with each passing minute. Husky shifted in his seat, checking his watch, a barely contained anxiety in his voice. "I sure hope that car's 71 degrees. The door to the conference room suddenly swung open, breaking the silence. Miles Finch, short and stocky, marched into the room, his presence demanding attention. Despite his height, his confidence was undeniable, and everyone felt his energy the moment he entered. "All right," Miles said curtly. "Let's do this." Walter, ever the professional, smiled and shook Miles's hand. "Miles, thanks so much for coming. We're all big fans. I'm Walter. We spoke on the phone." Yeah. Great. Let's get the, He waved toward the envelope of cash Walter had pulled from his jacket, "taken care of so we can get started." Walter slid the envelope across the table, watching as Miles checked the money, then tucked it into his vest pocket with a satisfied nod. "Okay, cool," Miles said, before cutting right to the point. "So what have you guys got so far?" Meanwhile, Buddy's high spirits were beginning to feel more out of place at his father's workplace. He burst into the conference room, announcing with childlike glee, I'm in love, and I don't care who knows it." Walter didn't even look at him, his patience already fraying. "Not now, Buddy. Why don't you go, back to the pit?" "I'll come visit you later, okay?" Buddy stopped in his tracks, his eyes falling on Miles Finch, who was barely 3 feet tall, his smug expression frozen in place. You didn't tell me you had Elvises working here, Buddy said, gesturing at Miles. Boy, you are hilarious, my friend, Miles spat, his icy stare boring into Buddy. Walter sighed, trying to regain control. So what are you saying, Miles? Let's get back to the book. Okay, Miles said. At the top of the cover is the title. Get this ready. A! He was cut off by Buddy, whose interruptions had begun to fray everyone's nerves. Buddy continued, oblivious. Boy, the candy canes here in New York just don't measure up to elf standards, do they? Miles's expression turned deadly cold. Gee whiz, we're all laughing our butts off. Walter, now fully exasperated, snapped, Buddy, please, just go in the basement. Buddy gave one last mischievous look at Miles before his playful nature fully collided with Finch's rage. The altercation that followed left Buddy reeling. Miles, in a fit of fury, threw a series of rapid punches at Buddy, who stumbled back, his face a mess of confusion and pain. What have I done? Buddy muttered, glancing down at his hand in disbelief. But that was enough to provoke the smaller man, and soon Miles was unleashing a flurry of blows. Buddy hit the ground, unable to keep up with the speed of Miles's attacks. With a final taunt, Miles stormed out, leaving the room silent and awkwardly still. Walter turned back to Buddy, his face twisted with frustration. Damn it, Buddy! This time you really did it! Get the hell out of here! Buddy's heart dropped. He'd never seen his father like this. Where do you want me to go? Buddy whispered, his voice barely a tremor. Walter's words cut deep. Go anywhere. I don't care if you're crazy. I don't care if you're an elf. I don't care if you're my son. Just stay out of my life. Buddy, overwhelmed with hurt, turned and fled. The bustling streets of Manhattan blurred around Buddy as he walked aimlessly through the cold night, his heart shattered by his father's cruel words. The city's lights and sounds seemed to mock his pain. As the snow began to fall, Buddy kept moving, the weight of his father's rejection pressing down on him with every step. The cold air of New York City whipped against Buddy's face as he trudged down the dark streets, his elf suit clinging to his frame. He was a peculiar sight, a small, forlorn figure against a backdrop of towering buildings. But the weight of his father's words echoed in his mind, relentless. Go anywhere. I don't care if you're crazy. I don't care if you're an elf. I don't care if you're my son. Just stay out of my life. The harshness of those words cut deep, deeper than any insult he had endured. He wasn't sure how long he'd been walking, but the city seemed colder, more distant with every step. His shoulders hunched, not from the chill, but from the overwhelming sadness that wrapped around him like an invisible cloak. Lost, he felt. In a city of millions, Buddy Hobbs was utterly alone. Walter sat in his office, the phone pressed to his ear, as his hand raked through his hair in frustration. The weight of his career, teetering on the edge of collapse, bore down on him. But there was something else, a gnawing guilt, sharp and insistent, about the words he'd thrown at Buddy. A son, an elf, a child he didn't understand but who had only ever tried to help. I can't really talk right now, Walter muttered into the phone, his mind scattered. Emily's voice cut through the tension, gentle but firm. You're going to be home for dinner, right? It is Christmas Eve. Walter leaned back in his chair, exhaling. It looks like it's going to be a late one. Oh, she paused, and he could hear the faint disappointment in her voice. Do you want me to send Buddy home early? The question lingered, making him feel even worse. Oh, we'll talk about it later. I gotta go, okay? He said quickly, ending the call before she could say more. Just as he put the phone down, 3 of his riders rushed into the room, papers in hand, excitement written across their faces. Husky, what is it? Walter asked, hoping for a distraction from his growing guilt. Husky thrust a black journal into Walter's hands. The cleaning man just found this. It's Miles Finch's notebook. He left it in the conference room. There's gold in here, Walter. Walter flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the words. The first pitch was brilliant, a story full of potential. How much time do we have? 45 minutes, Husky replied, eager. Walter's mind shifted gears. Let's get some storyboards ready. Buddy's hands trembled as he unwrapped the paper at the table in his small apartment. He was back in his elf suit, the vibrant green fabric a stark contrast to the loneliness in his heart. He dipped a quill into ink and began to write, his handwriting immaculate, almost too perfect to be real. I'm sorry I ruined your lives and crammed 11 cookies into the VCR. I don't belong here. I don't belong anywhere. I will never forget you. Love, Buddy. His heart ached as he finished the note. He placed the snow globe on the crease of the letter, as if sealing it for eternity. He couldn't stay, not after what his father had said. He stood and walked out into the night, the storm already raging around him. Back at home, Michael arrived with a bag full of presents, his eyes scanning the apartment for any sign of Buddy. Buddy? He called out, but the house was eerily quiet. His heart sank, a familiar feeling of dread creeping up his spine. Meanwhile, in the Greenway conference room, Walter sat at the head of the table, trying to keep his focus as Fulton Greenway stared him down. As you know, we need a big launch, fast, to get this company back on track. So I think I speak for my fellow board members when I say, Greenway paused dramatically, his gaze piercing. This better be good. Walter smiled, a flicker of confidence in his eyes. I'm confident, sir. You won't be disappointed. Greenway raised an eyebrow. Let's hear it. Walter's hand rested on the storyboards in front of him. Picture this, eh? Suddenly the door swung open and Michael burst in, holding the calligraphy scroll Buddy had left behind. The words cut through the room like a knife. Buddy left, Michael shouted. He wrote this note. He left his snow globe. He's gone. Walter's chest tightened. Okay, listen. Let me finish this meeting and we'll figure this out, okay? Michael's eyes burned with frustration. Finish your meeting? How'd I know you were going to say that? Walter's voice wavered, torn between duty and love for his son. Michael, wait! But Michael didn't stop. With a final glance, he stormed out. Walter's heart twisted. He turned back to the room, his mind racing. Mr. Greenway, we have to reschedule this. Greenway's face darkened. We don't have time to reschedule. I want to hear the damn thing now. Walter stood, his voice firm and defiant. No, it doesn't. We'll do this some other time, Mr. Greenway. The tension in the room crackled. Greenway's voice was icy. This isn't happening. You're going to sit in that chair and pitch me a hit friggin' book. Now. Walter's anger flared. Mr. Greenway, with all due respect, kiss my ass. Michael, standing in the doorway, echoed his sentiment, his voice strong. Kiss my ass, too. Outside, Buddy wandered through the snowstorm, lost in his thoughts. The world seemed as cold and harsh as the words his father had spoken, but as he reached the 59th Street Bridge, something caught his eye. A trail of smoke, glowing brightly against the dark sky. His heart skipped a beat as he squinted through the storm. There, high above the city, a sleigh, Santa's sleigh, plummeted from the heavens, tumbling out of control. His voice broke through the wind. Santa? Walter and Michael raced through the city, desperate to find Buddy. As they neared the 59th Street Bridge, Michael froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. Oh, Minnie died, whispered, pointing toward the sky. Walter spun around, his eyes searching for an explanation. What was that? But Michael had already turned and was running toward the park, his legs pumping furiously. Wait up, Michael! Walter shouted, chasing after his son. In the heart of Central Park, Santa's sleigh lay grounded in the snow, its reindeer grazing peacefully. Santa, clad in his red suit, struggled to repair the damaged sleigh, smoke rising from the engine. He looked up as Buddy approached, his face lighting up with relief. Santa! Buddy cried, his voice filled with concern. Are you okay? Santa gave a weary smile, clutching a tire iron. Back off, Slick! He shouted, before realizing who it was. Buddy? Is that you? Buddy nodded, his eyes wide with confusion and awe. What happened? The Clausometer dropped to 0, Santa explained, his voice tense. There's almost no Christmas spirit left in New York. The engine, it's broken. I need an elf's help. Buddy's face fell. But I'm not an elf, Santa. I can't do anything right. Santa knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Buddy, you're more of an elf than anyone I've ever met. You're the only one who can fix my sleigh. Buddy blinked, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. Really? Santa nodded. Really? Will you help me? I will. Papa taught me how, Buddy said with determination. Then hurry, Santa urged. You'll have to find it first, though. The engine's a little ways back. Buddy didn't hesitate. He ran into the woods, ready to help. Back at Jovi's apartment, the quiet hum of the television filled the room. New York One was reporting on the strange events unfolding in Central Park. The footage was shaky, but unmistakable. Buddy running through the snow, tripping and stumbling like a character from an old Bigfoot video. Jovi's eyes widened as she saw him on screen. "Oh, my God," she whispered, her heart racing. In the heart of Central Park, Walter and Michael stared at the wreckage of Santa's sleigh. The sight was surreal, unbelievable. Michael looked at Walter, still processing the madness of it all. "So, you're real?" I asked, still in shock. Santa smiled, his face full of warmth. "Tell me, Michael, what did you want for Christmas?" "I wanted a skateboard," Michael replied, his voice quiet. Santa pulled out a scroll and unrolled it. A real Huff board with high 145 Thunder trucks, 52mm Spitfire Classic wheels, and Swiss bearings. He looked up at Michael with a twinkle in his eye. "It's all here?" For a moment, everything felt possible. Even Walter, usually the skeptic, could feel it, a sense of belief. The sleigh's engine shuddered, and the Claus-o-meter rose slightly. Michael looked up, his eyes wide with excitement. "They fly away! Quick! Before they catch you!" Santa hesitated, his expression turning serious. "I wish I could, but I need more than just you two to make this sleigh fly." Michael's face lit up with an idea. "Wait! If you're really Santa, then we can just get the news cameras in here and everyone will believe in you. The sleigh will fly then, right?" Santa sighed, his eyes reflecting years of wisdom. "Christmas spirit is about believing, not seeing. If the whole world saw me, all would be lost. The paparazzi have been after me for years." Michael's gaze flicked to the distant riders, Central Park Rangers, their silhouettes cutting through the trees. "Look!" he said urgently. Buddy pulled Walter aside, whispering a plan to him. Michael followed, unsure of what could be done, but trusting in Buddy's resolve. And so, under the cold, unyielding sky of New York City, the Hobbs family, father, son, and adopted elf, stood on the edge of something extraordinary, their faith in one another stronger than any storm that might come their way. The cold night air in Central Park seemed to hang heavy, a blanket of winter crispness smothering every sound, save for the pounding hooves of the rangers' horses, their silhouettes galloping swiftly through the dark woods. They were on a mission, but for what, none could yet tell. The great lawn stretched before them, bathed in the eerie glow of street lights, and Michael, full of determination, snatched the list from Santa's hand before anyone could react. His heart hammered in his chest as he ran, darting into the woods with the list clutched tightly. "My list!" Santa called after him, alarm in his voice. But Buddy, ever calm and quick-thinking, stopped the jolly man from giving chase. With a firm hand on Santa's shoulder, he took control. "Santa, let him go," Buddy said, his voice low and authoritative. "You'll get it back. Now listen to me. I need you to give Walter your hat and coat." Santa looked down at the oversized outfit, a look of deep uncertainty in his eyes. "But Mrs. Claus made them for me." Walter, nearly frantic, shot a desperate glance toward Buddy. "Hurry! Do you have any idea what would happen to Santa Claus in prison?" With a resigned sigh, Santa handed over the coat, and Walter, looking comically small in the voluminous garb, donned the festive suit. His eyes were wide and his face pale as he adjusted the hat on his head. Elsewhere at the barricades, where the chaos of the night had already begun, a remote reporter was doing her best to maintain composure as Michael, now out of the trees, ran straight for the crowd. His chest heaving with the effort. "A young boy has just come running out of the park. Let me see if I can get a comment." The reporter's voice quivered slightly as she approached him. "Did you see him?" Michael, unblinking, held up the list for her to see. "It's the real Santa," he said with such conviction that his words seemed to echo through the still night. "His sleigh can't fly 'cause nobody believes in him." The reporter raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Now this is feeling more and more like some kind of elaborate Christmas hoax. This isn't a stunt." Michael's voice cracked with urgency. "It's true. Everyone out there, Santa needs us to believe. I can prove he's real." He whipped the list out, unfolding it with trembling hands. "Lynn Kessler wants a Powerpuff Girls play set. Mark Webber wants an electric guitar." The camera cut to Lynn and Mark, both watching in awe as Michael read from the list, their eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. Their hearts stirred as they felt their belief in something larger than themselves awaken. Back in the apartment, Emily, groceries still in her arms, stood frozen in front of the TV. "Michael," she whispered in disbelief, her heart swelling as she realized her son had become a beacon of hope for all. Back in Central Park, Michael's voice rang out again, his face lighting up as he called names from the list with an unshakable certainty. "Stan Tobias wants a Power Pumper water rifle. Carolyn Reynolds wants a Susie Talks a Lot." At home, Carolyn, the young girl from the doctor's office, sat wide-eyed in front of her television, hearing her name mentioned with a smile. "Thank you, buddy," she whispered, as though the very air around her had changed, imbued with something magical. Even as Michael continued reading, the distant figures of bikers, the sharp-eyed guards of the Empire State Building, and the employees in their offices all tuned in. Christmas spirit stirred in ways they couldn't explain, slowly creeping into their hearts. Meanwhile, on the barricade, the reporter smiled, though it was tinged with disbelief. "That's quite enough, little fella," she said, trying to regain some control of the situation. Michael, however, was undeterred. He turned toward her with an impish grin. "What's your name?" "Charlotte Denon," she replied, her voice softening. "Let me see," Michael said, scanning her with knowing eyes. "Charlotte Denon wants a Tiffany engagement ring, and for your boyfriend to stop dragging his feet and commit already." The reporter blinked, stunned. The crowd, too, seemed taken aback. A new silence fell over the scene, and even the reporter's usual professionalism seemed shaken. But at that very moment, something remarkable happened. A surge of Christmas spirit, like an invisible tide, rippled through the air. The sleigh, which had been stubbornly grounded, lurched slightly, lifting off the ground by a full foot. "We got power!" Santa cried out, his voice full of hope. He looked at Buddy, who was still struggling with the sleigh's engine. "I told you we'd make it work." Buddy, still working furiously, glanced up with a grimace. "I don't have the engine fixed yet." Santa gave him a reassuring smile, though the sleigh's jerky movements hardly inspired confidence. Meanwhile, Buddy, soaked in sweat and determination, refused to stop until it was done. As the reporter's cameraman struggled with technical issues, the scene around them darkened, and the crowd murmured in confusion. The once gleaming lights now flickered, dying out completely. But Charlotte Denon, following Michael's insistence, took a deep breath and tried to focus. "How did you know that?" she asked, a mix of awe and disbelief in her voice. "Because," Michael said, his voice unwavering, "it's Santa, and he needs our help. He needs us to believe." The crowd around him seemed to quiet for a moment of collective realization. Jovi, suddenly sprinting through the crowd, found Emily and Michael. She was breathless but full of determination. "Where's Buddy?" she asked urgently. "He's with Santa," Michael replied, eyes wide with fear. "The sleigh won't fly without belief, and no one's believing. We have to get those cameras back on." Jovi, a flash of inspiration striking her, climbed onto a nearby horse-drawn carriage. She hesitated, nervous, but then she began to sing, her voice trembling at first, but then growing stronger with each note. "The best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear." Walter, still in his oversized Santa outfit, spotted the mounted police charging forward. His eyes widened in panic as he turned to face the approaching riders. "Get out of here! They're coming!" he shouted, trying to divert their attention. "There's enough Christmas spirit to start moving." Buddy, with no time to waste, fumbled with the sleigh's engine. His heart raced as he heard the sound of hooves drawing nearer. Grab the shotgun under the seat and give them some heat, Santa called. Buddy, looking bewildered, stared at him. What? A joke, Buddy? Santa chuckled. Lighten up. We need to keep moving. As the sleigh lurched forward, its engine sputtering and sparking, the mounted police continued their pursuit. The sleigh's path was chaotic. Trees scraping its sides, branches breaking in their wake. Still, Santa held on, struggling to keep control as the Rangers bore down on them. The sleigh, barely clinging to life, flew through the air, its magic barely holding it together, while Buddy worked tirelessly beneath it. The sleigh took flight, albeit with no engine, its journey uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope. The night air in Central Park was thick with excitement as the barricade stretched across the street, encircling the crowd of people gathered in eager anticipation. Atop a weathered car roof, Jovi stood nervously, her heart pounding in her chest. With the city lights reflecting off the snow around her, she hesitated for a moment before she gathered enough courage to sing. Her voice, sweet yet fragile, cracked under the pressure, but she pushed through, her breath visible in the chilly air. You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. Her voice quivered, but there was a spark of something that carried her through. From below, Walter arrived, his face a mix of disbelief and awe as he joined his family, his eyes locking on Jovi's fragile performance. Emily, standing next to him, whispered with a smile. He wasn't lying. You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. Her voice quivered, but there was a spark of something that carried her through. From below, Walter arrived, his face a mix of disbelief and awe, as he joined his family, his eyes locking on Jovi's fragile performance. Emily, standing next to him, whispered with a smile. He wasn't lying. Merry Christmas, Walter replied softly, his words lost in the din of the crowd. He wrapped his arms around Emily, pulling her close. The warmth of their embrace stood in stark contrast to the crisp night air. Nearby, Buddy's sleigh careened through the park, risking its own destruction as Buddy worked furiously under the hood, his hands moving with desperate speed. The sound of sizzling and the occasional spark filled the air. Santa, ever the vigilant leader, struggled to maintain control, his hands gripping the reins. A sudden jolt sent them barreling over a bump, toys flying from the back of the sleigh. A jack-in-the-box whizzed by Buddy, its mechanical mouth snapping open. Ah! Buddy yelped, startled by the unexpected distraction. Hang on! Santa called out, his voice strained. We're almost there, but the road ahead held more challenges. As they approached a giant fountain, the Rangers were closing in behind them, and there was no way around it. I'm almost there, Buddy shouted over the engine's roar. We need power now, Santa commanded, his voice cracking with urgency. Buddy's fingers worked quickly, adjusting a final mechanism. The sleigh's engine suddenly roared to life, a tremendous surge of energy exploding beneath them. The sleigh shot upward, the force of a rocket, clearing the fountain by mere inches. Yes, I did it! I'm the greatest adopted elf in the whole wide world. Buddy shouted in triumph, his grin infectious. Santa's voice boomed with pride. Good job, Buddy! But the victory was short-lived. As the sleigh soared, its belly collided with the winged statue that crowned the fountain, and in a split second the engine was ripped from its place, the sleigh sputtering and losing all power. The once gleaming vehicle plunged back down to the ground, crashing hard onto the bricks. That's it, Santa said, his voice deflated. With no engine, we're toast. Back at the barricade, Jovi continued her song, her voice stronger now as the crowd gathered around her. He sees you when you're sleeping, she sang, her tone growing more confident. Emily was the first to join in, her voice joining with Jovi's. Slowly, others began to follow, and soon the whole crowd was singing, the warmth of their collective spirit rising into the night. As the voices filled the air, a remote reporter, watching the scene unfold, snapped to attention. Come back to Remote 3. I think I've got something here, she said into her earpiece, her fingers flying over her controls. The cameras snapped to life again. the lights from the remote truck flaring on, casting the scene in a magical glow. Charlotte Dennon back at Central Park. Although it was still unclear about what led to this holiday rally, hundreds of New Yorkers have spontaneously gathered together and broken out into song. A curious Christmas Eve, to say the least. Let's listen in. As the music swelled, the scene cut briefly across the city, people in bars, offices, even teenagers in snowball fights, all singing along in perfect harmony. The sound echoed through the streets, reaching all corners of the city. The elf manager at Gimbel's joined in, his voice unenthusiastic, though still part of the chorus. "Do what you want. I ain't singing a damn thing," he muttered, though his colleagues cheerfully ignored him. Meanwhile, the sleigh continued its perilous journey, scraping along the mall's paved path, sparks flying in all directions. The Rangers closed in, the situation growing ever more dire, but Walter, standing with his family at the barricade, suddenly realized something. His gaze flickered to Michael, who was singing with all his heart. "Wait, you're not singing," Michael accused, pointing a finger at his father. "Yes, I am," Walter protested weakly. "No, you're not. You're just moving your lips," Michael insisted, his voice rising in disbelief. Walter groaned, his face turning red. "Michael, please, I have a terrible voice." But before he could back out, his voice broke free in a terrible strained attempt at the chorus, causing nearby singers to look at him in alarm. "Santa Claus is coming to town!" he bellowed, his voice a hideous screech. The sound of Walter's off-key singing had an unexpected effect. Suddenly, the Clausometer flashed to life, its gauge shooting into the red zone. The sleigh's engines hummed to life, powered by the collective spirit of the crowd. Santa's eyes widened in excitement. "Ho, ho, ho!" Santa laughed as the sleigh soared into the night, clearing the barricade in a single leap. The Rangers slid to a halt, unable to follow as the sleigh ascended into the starry sky above. The crowd below erupted in joyous celebration, their voices rising even higher, singing in unison. Jovi, her eyes wide with disbelief, took in the sight. With newfound strength, she sang louder, her voice now a beacon in the night. A booming voice rang out from the shadow of the sleigh as it flew overhead, cutting through the cold air with a magical resonance. "Oh, Merry Christmas!" Santa's voice echoed, and the sleigh soared down 6th Avenue, leaving behind a trail of wonder. As the sleigh disappeared into the night, the city's collective cheer filled the air, the scene freezing into an image of joy and magic. In the warmth of Hobbs's apartment on Christmas Day, Walter, Michael, Buddy, Emily, and Jovi sat together, their faces lit by the soft glow of the Christmas tree. Wrapping paper was scattered across the floor, the remnants of a joyful morning. Papa Elf's voice filled the air, a nostalgic note in his tone. "And so, with a little help, Buddy managed to save Christmas," Papa Elf said warmly. "And his spirit saved a lot of other people, too. It was quite a Christmas and quite a new year." Later, in Walter's new office, the name Hobbs Publishing was stenciled onto the door, marking the beginning of a new chapter in his life. Papa Elf's voice continued. Walter started his own independent publishing company. His first book was written by a brand new, critically acclaimed children's author. Buddy's book, Elf, had become a bestseller. A book signing at Gimbel's saw Buddy, grinning ear to ear, surrounded by fans. Papa Elf's voice filled the scene. The book was called Elf, a fictional story about an adopted elf named Buddy who was raised in the North Pole, went to New York, ate spaghetti, worked in a shiny mailroom, and eventually saved Christmas. The scene shifted to Buddy and Walter, ice skating together at Rockefeller Center. It was a small, private moment, far removed from the chaos of the city. They shared the kind of bonding only time could nurture, Buddy's hand attempting to hold Walter's, though Walter swatted it away with an affectionate sigh. Back at the workshop, Buddy slammed his head into a doorframe, his usual clumsiness still as endearing as ever. "Ow! Yikes! Golly, Charles Dickens!" he muttered in frustration. Jovi, now fully clad in elf clothes, set a pitcher of milk in front of Papa Elf. Buddy cradled a newborn baby in his arms, a little girl named Susie, her tiny pink elf hat a perfect match for the moment. The scene froze in time, the image turning into a drawing as the last page of Buddy's elf book flipped closed. The camera pulled back, revealing the same bookstore from the opening scene,